This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation Pop. Welcome back, or welcome if this is your first edition of Traders of the Lost Arks. I am Tim Capel, joined as always by our illustrious panel here, Scott Schiff Lit, in a formal sense. How are you this evening?
I'm glad to be back. You know, we had a little bit of a break, but, you know, we're back ready to talk about an arc that I didn't think, when I first told it, I was like, oh, stupid Avengers in the 80s. And then I was like, oh my god, Avengers in the 80s was some batshit stuff. So I'm ready to talk about it and discuss it with you guys.
Yes. Andy Atherton, you're the man who makes this all possible. Limited exposure to comics as a whole. I imagine very limited exposure to Avengers in the 80s. Are you excited to dig into this melodrama, sir?
Oh, yeah. I'm quite excited. For the first time, we have a large group of characters. The first one we did, Capwolf was kind of limited, and the Superman Batman one. This is like introducing all these characters and ones that I'm actually somewhat familiar with now because of television and movies. And there was a lot going on here. It was a lot for my newbie comics brain to unpack. So yeah, you guys picked a doozy, Sean.
That's right. The aforementioned Sean Kidd. This was your pick. In some sense, you are holding us all hostage tonight. You're going to be on trial. But no, I'm glad you picked this. This is kind of awesome. And I know you are very much looking forward to unpacking it all.
I am, as I sit here in my office, my freshly renovated office full of comic book statue and childhood nostalgia, and I sit here and look specifically at the characters who are the center point of tonight's arc. Oh. I am so super happy to talk about this childhood. I don't know how to really describe this arc. I can't wait to talk about it, but yeah. 7-year-old Sean, when he read this, he kicked my ass, and I've never been able to forget about it. And I couldn't think of a better one to really bring you fine folks into the loop on and share with. And it really, when Ant-Man came out, and because of the characters in that movie, pretty much all the characters of that movie are represented in this arc tonight, and I thought it was really good to do this one, so I'm so happy to do it. I'm over the moon to talk about it today. So,
would you consider this a character assassination?
I'm gonna let Tim lead it from here. So we'll
okay.
Go. Yeah, I'm gonna let Tim go from here, and we'll just talk about it.
That's an interesting lead-off question. That is definitely on the agenda for me. I do want to get into that, but just to kind of set the stage here, let folks know. I mean, like it says on the tin, we are discussing the Avengers storyline, sort of informally known as the Trial of Yellow Jacket. It's not one sort of concrete story. It spans several issues. In fact, it really runs from Avengers Volume 1, issues 212 through 230, but we didn't read all that many comics. We read it.
You did it. I mean, we did.
Well, yeah, I kind of did. I found myself getting sidetracked and distracted along the ways because such is the greatness of 80s Avengers for me. But, Sean, you did a really great job of curating this for us. Really reading it in the experience that you presented to us, I think, gave us the complete story, and you didn't feel like there was anything left out, which was pretty nice. So, officially, the issues we read were Avengers 212 and 213, 217, 224, and then 227 through 230. So, it kind of is in fits and starts here, but that'll give you the full story of Hank Pym's fall from grace, as it was told, starting under the regime of one writer, concluded under another. And, this is a story that I think is pretty infamous. Like, a lot of comic fans have heard of it, but I think it's also so old that not so many people have necessarily read it and know, like, the finer points of it. Like, there's one scene in particular that happens very early on in the saga, like in our second issue, that everyone sort of knows about, but that is not the whole story, right? There's much more to it than just the scene, which we will get to. So I think this is fair game as a pick. It's not, again, the most obscure thing we've ever covered on this podcast, nor, will it be. Yeah, Cap Wolf. I mean, come on. But it's something that I don't think a lot of, like, current comics readers are going to be familiar with. I mean, let's face it, when we say 80s Avengers, this is very early 80s Avengers, in fact. These are issues that are cover dated October 1981 through April of 1983. So essentially, these would have been on the stands starting in the back half of 1981 and spanning basically the entire calendar year of 1982. There's like one issue that's published in 83. That's our last issue. But that's, early 80s Marvel Comics and Avengers. So, Sean, I want to... Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was going to say something. Go ahead first.
Well, I just want to know why were you drawn to... I mean, you mentioned this is sort of nice synergy, nice alignment with, the Ant-Man film, Ant-Man Quantumania, currently in theaters. Was that what drew you to this, or was it one that did you have this on your mind going into when we started this podcast?
It's funny. I was about to say, Tim, can I say why I picked this? And then you just from there. So I thought about it. And the majority of the people that we associate with in random chats and PTBN, they're all they know modern day Marvel through the cinematic universe, right? Most of the pods we've done on the pop feed have been about the MCU. Andy does Stream Lounge around the MCU. Andy mostly knows about Marvel characters through the MCU.
I was going to say, I'm Exhibit A.
Yeah, Andy is Exhibit A. So when I was thinking through this pod and Ant-Man was coming out, I'm like, I wonder how many people really, like, when you think about Hank Pym and you think about the Avengers, how do I shock and awe? Like, if we do this podcast, and I go back to the arc that really got me into the Avengers, like literally what we're going to talk about tonight, this is where I began my Avengers. Like, I started reading the Avengers with this arc. This was my first, like, true, and I'll tell you, Tim, this is going to crack you up. Issue number 224 was the very first Avengers story I ever read.
Wow. Okay.
So
that's completely wild to me, knowing the content of that.
What I did not share with you, 224 was the first one I ever read. So the backstory of 224, I had to go back and read 212, which started this whole series, because 224, what happened in those 220, 212, 213, and 217 is what kind of led to 224. And for those that know the MCU only, there's some huge shock and awe in this arc that they'll go back, and I know Andy did it, and so did Schiff, go, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? And that's the reaction I wanted, because that's what you got, and that's what people that listen to this pod and they actually went back and read the comics, that's what's going to happen. So, and I love this story, and when we go through this, reading this as a 7-year-old kid, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And that's what I want people to realize. And based on how beloved these characters are, specifically Hank Pym, Janet Van Dyne, who in the MCU are very much different than they are in the comics.
Right. We're talking characters played on film by Michael Douglas and Michelle Pfeiffer. These are our principal characters.
There are principal characters who are founding members of the actual Avengers team. And then you also see Scott Lang in this arc, very, very different Scott Lang, briefly, who also does mention his daughter Cassie in some form or fashion, who actually works for Tony Stark Industries. So I just thought this is a really cool arc to kind of get MCU, to get Andy and Schiff particularly, but anybody that only knows it through the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Let's talk about the comics version and really talk about what the Avengers is. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So,
I mean, in full disclosure, for me, I was aware of the events in these issues. Like, I got into Avengers like in the 90s. I'm sure I've told this story before.
And you and I are very into that. We talked about this several times between you and me. Yeah. Go ahead.
And I got heavily into the Avengers like as of the Heroes Return era. That when they, Kurt Busiek and George Perez kind of revitalizing the series, and Hank Pym and Wasp were returning members to the team, and I kind of got to know them primarily through those stories, but I'd read about their background, their histories, just from character bios that you could find online, just on fan sites on the internet as it existed in, 1997, 1998. And so I knew like that these events had taken place. I'd never actually read these issues until prepping for this podcast. Like I've read a lot of 80s Avengers, but not this early 80s stuff. So this is my first time actually reading the issues. So it was kind of a treat for me in that respect. And so, Schiff, question for you: how familiar are you with the characters of Hank and Janet, like from the comics? I know that you came into comics like later than I did, even, and I'm trying to think of like how much impact they've even really had on modern day Marvel comics, like over the course of the past, I don't know, 10 years.
I'm trying to remember because I read Avengers Disassembled, and I can't remember if they were in there, but I think they were in Civil War. The most I actually remember them is in Zombies, actually, where
Marvel Zombies.
Yeah, where I can't remember. I think one of them ate the other, but everyone's eating everyone.
As you do in a Marvel stuff.
Yeah,
comic,
which
yeah.
we might.
One
do
of them
that.
ate the other.
We might do that run when it gets back to me because it's so much fun it is.
Well, here's the thing: if one of them did eat the other, it had to have been playing off of events that we are going to cover here, because what happens in this story arc, like neither character has ever been able to live it down for whatever reason. Like it's almost like it. There's this expression. I don't know who the first. There's a comics creator who sort of coined this term. Like when you do something to a character that so crosses a line, like it almost leaves them radioactive. And no matter how much you try to get them back to basics or rehabilitate them, sometimes it can just never be done.
And this is actually one of them, because what we're about to get into, they make jokes like Jessica Jones in one of her panels was like, I got beaten up like Hank used to beat up Janet. And I was like, God damn, pal, we're shooting folks. So like, and this was something that came out in 2000, like mid 2000s when I read that. And I want to get into it more, but actually, to answer the zombie one, looks like Pym was actually infected by Janet Van Dyne.
Okay.
So.
Well, she was on the other foot there.
Yeah.
But
that's what happened in What If. I remember that. I think she gets infected in the quantum realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
the Disney Plus series.
In the Disney Plus one, yeah. Mm-hmm. So
she comes back from it with the zombie virus, yeah.
I just went in with Hank Pym. Like I got a second like eye opening, I guess, on how he was portrayed on What If, because he was the cause of a lot of issues in a few of those episodes. So I was kind of like, there must be something in the comics that they're deriving this from.
There's a lot. All right, so I'm going to give you the creative teams now, which, oh boy, deep breath, right? So you have, as the writer writing these issues that we're going to be covering, Jim Shooter on issues 212 through 213, 217, and 224. He also had a scripter on issue 224, Alan Zelenitz. That's a name that I don't think I've ever said out loud. Not a real prominent comics writer. Roger Stern comes in towards the end, issues 227 through 230. Pencilers, You had Alan Kupperberg on 212, Bob Hall on 213 and 217, Mark Bright on 224, Sal Buscema on 227, Al Milgrom 228 to 230. Yeah, just a parade of pencilers there. No real
pretty
stability.
well-known names, though. Some well-known names to note.
Names, yeah, awesome. Just not a lot of stability in the art department, right? Same deal with the anchors. Dan Green, 212, 213, 217. Brett Breeding coming in for 224, 227, and 228. Joe Sinnott rounding it out, 229 and 230. Letterer, Janice Chang on 212 and 213, 224. Joe Rosen on 217, 227. And Jim Novak then on 228 through 230. Colorist, Ben Shawn, a name I've never heard, on 212. Don Warfield, another one, 213. And then Christy Shield, 217, 224, 227 through 230. Your editor initially is going to be Jim Salicrup for 212 and 213 and 217. Then Mark Grunwald, the writer of Capwolf, is there for the end here. Yeah, he's an editor and writer, was Mark Grunwald. 224, 227 through 230 are going to be the issues he edits. He has a very long editorship of the Avengers, does Mark Grunwald. Overseeing all of it, editor-in-chief, coming full circle here, Jim Shooter, so the guy who primarily wrote this as the architect, is also the editor-in-chief of the entire company.
Pod favorite Jim Shooter.
Pod favorite Jim Shooter. We talked about him last episode on G.I. Joe Transformers. I don't want us to repeat ourselves, but it's just, and Sean, I think you feel the same way. It's almost impossible to talk about a Jim Shooter story without talking about Jim Shooter the person.
It's one of my favorite parts.
I know. He's just one of those very larger than life characters within his industry, right? He's sort of I don't know, I almost liken him to like an Eric Bischoff or WCW, I don't know if I'd go as high as like a Ted Turner, but he's one of these guys who, he has like that very outsized ego. He's very vocal. He was very visible at a time when that position was not a very visible position in comics. But brought a lot of stability at the same time. We talked about this. He came in the late 70s, so was like the assistant editor for the entire line starting in 76, and by 78 was the overall editor-in-chief, a job he would keep until 1987 when his higher-ups at not even at Marvel, but at the company that owned Marvel, which at the time I think was New World Pictures, caught wind of him being burned in effigy by his subordinates at a holiday party by the Marvel staff. So that's how well liked he was by a lot of his employees, but remains a controversial figure in comics. Again, I don't want to repeat the whole spiel about him, but he was a workhorse. He did a lot of writing in addition to his editorial duties. So we'll get into that. But first, here's what else was being published at the same time as these issues. Now, because this spans such a long period of time, I didn't take down everything, right? So I just want to give the highlights, mainly, again, from this period, of what would have been on the newsstands.
Some big stuff.
Some big stuff, yeah, on your local spinner rack here. Really, again, the second half of 81 through 1982. You had Superman and Spider-Man, which was actually the sequel to the first ever intercompany crossover, Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. So I'd forgotten they actually did a sequel to that, but that came out in 81.
Yep.
You got John Byrne. I know this is a favorite of yours, Sean, beginning his 62 issue run as writer-artist on Fantastic Four.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Exciting. Flash number 300, big anniversary released. Another intercompany crossover, Batman versus the Incredible Hulk. That's one I haven't actually read. I need to check that out.
I actually have not read that either.
Yeah. So you get Defenders, number 100, anniversary for that title. Another anniversary, big one, X-Men, number 150. This is where Magneto kind of starts his face turn, right? This is where the Holocaust he's a Holocaust survivor. That's the big reveal in that issue, and majorly turning the corner for that character. That's by Claremont and Dave Cockrum in his second run as artist on X-Men.
Yep.
Another big debut, Marvel Man by Alan Moore. This was in the UK anthology series Warrior. So this was like who we think of as Miracle Man, right? With some really mature readers content over the course of these stories. I'll just say it's pretty dark stuff there in the early 80s by Alan Moore. Justice League of America hits issue 200. Daredevil 181 by Frank Miller. That's sort of in the middle of his run. Death of Elektra there.
Big issue.
Yeah. You get Steve Gerber creating the Destroyer Duck to finance his lawsuit against Marvel Comics. He was Howard Duck. A great 1980s film. I know one of your favorites, I'm sure, Andy.
Oh, yeah. What's on theater?
Very, very different from the comics. Maybe we'll do some Howard the Duck comics at some point.
I have never read a Howard the Duck comic, so I would welcome that. Yeah,
they're zany. They're nuts. They are completely nuts. I think you'd enjoy them. They're very 70s, but they're very, I don't know. It's almost like, it almost feels like if George Carlin, like early 70s, hits George Carlin wrote comics or something. Anyway, the first issue of Marvel's G.I. Joe series, which we kind of took a dip into that pond last episode. All right, so Marvel publishes its first ever limited series. So we get a few of these. We got the Marvel Superheroes Contest of Champions, 3 issues.
Yes, I remember that.
Isn't this like, it's kind of doo-doo shit, right? Like it's
with the
Collector
and
the Collector and the Grand Master
from the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Guardians of the Galaxy Collector. Yeah, that guy. So yes,
those characters.
Yep.
It's sort of like, is it kind of like a response to the Olympics or something? It's almost a world tour of
it's like the best. It's like almost like Hanna-Barbera doing Laugh Olympics.
Oh god.
Is there a Laugh Olympics comic? Because
it is. Yes, it's their version of the Laugh.
It's their version of Laugh Olympics. Yes, correct.
And it sucks. But it's kind of
it sucks. Just like Laugh Olympics.
It sucks, but it's fun.
Yes.
Yeah. Hercules.
Just for that, I'm picking a Hanna-Barbera comic then next time it's my turn. Then fuck off.
Oh shit.
We gotta. Hey, what? I'll do Laugh Olympics with you. Just FYI. But hey, one thing I'll say about the limited series, that I was very much into those too. So Contest of Champions, the Hercules one, very much got me into the character of Hercules that you were just talking about. So
is that the one? Okay, so is that the one where Galactus gets drunk and takes his helmet off?
Yes. Yes. And then they actually do a sequel limited series a year later, which I like as well. So
well, I can never remember if the Galactus scene is in that or the sequel, but anyway.
No, it's not in the sequel. It's in the first one.
Oh my god, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And finally, the Wolverine 4-issue limited series by Claremont and Miller. Kind of your first ever superstar creative team pairing at a time where, like, you had name creators in comics, but you didn't really necessarily lead with that, right? But this was one where it's like Claremont, Miller, Wolverine. You're like, holy fuck, right? And it lives up to the hype. It's as good as it sort of promised to be. So
one of my favorite. I almost chose that one over this one, and before
I remember.
Yeah, I almost chose that. That's an amazing story. So,
Oh, trucking along here, you get the Great Darkness Saga over in Legion of Superheroes. Never been much of a Legion fan or reader, but I know that's a major storyline for them. Roger Stern, who's going to round out our issues here, he at the time had a pretty well received, acclaimed run on Amazing Spider-Man. So it's him and John Romita Jr. Notably here, the storyline, or just two issues really. Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut. Just a really standout story during his lengthy Spider-Man run over there. That's in Amazing Spider-Man 229. Let's see. Oh, and the last intercompany crossover on the list here, Uncanny X-Men and New Teen Titans. That's awesome. That's probably my favorite of any intercompany crossover ever. And I'm not even like a big Titans fan, you know. But it's just so good. Claremont and Walt Simonson, who's just an amazing superhero artist.
Yeah.
We have Crisis on Earth Prime. That's a crossover between the Justice League and All-Star Squadron. Another storyline we've talked about, Sean, on a late lamented podcast that shall not be named. Vision and Scarlet Witch.
Yep.
With their original 4-issue limited series, primarily by Bill Mantlo and Rick Leonardi.
Which we did cover on a late podcast, yes. That has been covered.
Yes.
Yes.
Marvel, not only getting in the limited series game, but the graphic novel game. These are probably their three best graphic novels, and I never realized they all came out.
Can I guess one? Can I guess
Yeah,
one?
please.
The New Mutants.
Yep, New Mutants was one of them. Yep.
Yes.
That's the debut of the New Mutants, in fact.
Correct.
Not only that, God Loves, Man Kills.
No way.
Heralded as one of the all-time, if not greatest, X-Men stories ever. And then lastly, Death of Captain Marvel, which is huge.
Oh my God! So
is that when he dies of cancer?
Yes, it is.
Marvel.
Marvel, the original Captain Marvel,
which
Marvel,
is briefly referenced in this arc at the end of it. By the way,
it is in a weird little aside and two
God
weird
Man
little
Kills.
asides.
God Love Man Kills. William Stryker is in that one, correct?
Yes,
he is in the movies. X-Men
he
movies.
went on to great prominence in the. That's one of those weird situations where they because that second X-Men movie is a very loose. People give it more credit than it really deserves, honestly. But it's a loose adaptation of God Loves, Man Kills. So they do a version of the Reverend Stryker character, but he's a government. He's like a government agent rather than a reverend in the movies. And because all of those movies are really just about Wolverine, they have to give him some kind of tie to Wolverine.
Yeah.
So that all of a sudden makes Stryker this incredibly important character in the X-Men film franchise that he never was in the comics. I mean, it's not the only story he appears in, but for years and years, it was kind of one and done for him. He does come back much later, but those are in more recent X-Men comics. But he's not similar at all, really, to the Stryker from the movies. But
82 big year.
Yeah.
Big year 82.
The last note I have for Marvel is they are launching their creator-owned Epic Comics imprint. So this was just in response to a lot of Dreadstar. Yep. I was wondering if you had any favorites from that.
Dreadstar, yeah.
A lot of creators were bailing DC Marvel.
Was Swords of the Swashbucklers part of that too? I want to say maybe. I think that was one of their titles. I'm not sure.
Sounds like one of them. I am not an authority. I need to read more epics. I'm not well versed in a lot of that stuff, other than recognizing the titles, right?
Yeah.
But it was just in response to just creators who were leaving to do their own, self-published type stuff in the 80s, because it was a pretty lucrative field, and again allowed them to retain the rights to their own creations. This work for hire shit was getting old. They're tired of making money for somebody else for all these years slaving away. So this was sort of a response to that. Said, hey, stick with us here at Marvel, sign a contract with us, and you'll have an opportunity to still own your own work here through Epic, through that imprint. So early foray into creator-owned stuff under a Marvel banner. And finally on the list, again on the creator-owned front, the Hernandez brothers, the very, very acclaimed and a lot of, I guess, art circles, Love and Rockets by Fantagraphics. It's a long-running anthology series, first published in 1982. That's how far back that goes. I've never read any of that, but I know that it has a very, very devoted cult audience, and it's, critically acclaimed, award-winning, kind of slice of life type comics. So, wow.
Good stuff. Great stuff.
Did you have anything I didn't mention there, Sean? I think
no. When you really listen, the graphic novels, like the biggest thing I remember back from what you said, the graphic novels, the treasuries, the limited series, those at all, and the fact that those all came out that year, that was a year, man. That really takes me back. That really takes me back. Wow, good stuff.
All right, so now let's get into it here. The trial of Yellow Jacket proper. We're gonna sink our teeth into this one, folks. I'm going to start off by saying that as of, 1981, 1982 in Marvel Comics, Hank Pym was a boring character. There were a lot of attempts to revitalize him. He started out as Ant-Man in the 60s. He had his sidekick, the Wasp. They had a little feature in Tales to Astonish, which was a then anthology book for Marvel. Eventually, he joins and is he and the Wasp are founding members of the Avengers in 1963. He then adopts a new identity as Giant Man because shrinking kind of sucks as a power, I guess. Giant Man becomes Goliath. Goliath becomes Yellow Jacket. So they're trying all these gimmicks just to kind of get this guy over and give him something because, let's face it, when you've got Hank Pym... I don't know why you're laughing.
Because he goes through the gimmicks, it reminds me of Brutus Beefcake.
I was going to say, he's like Glenn Jacobs there.
He really, he really is. He's like a wrestler trying to settle on an identity, and just nothing really stuck.
Just shit gimmick after shit gimmick.
Shit gimmick after shit gimmick.
By the way, I think Yellow Jacket's pretty badass, though.
I was going to say, that's the one that finally took. They seem to finally get it right. It's his most long-running, I think, up to that point.
I think it's the costume, though. The Yellow Jacket costume kind of makes it for me.
It's pretty slick.
I don't know.
It's pretty slick. I like it. Yeah, and it gets him away from the size-changing gimmick, which, Wasp is already doing that, so what do you really get with... And plus, it had been sort of passed on to other characters at this point. Like, there was already, a legacy Ant-Man running around. You get Scott Lang taking over as Ant-Man, and you get... who was it? Bill Foster became the new Goliath, who was like a research scientist, worked with Hank Pym. So he had plenty of size-changing characters. It's not that spectacular of a power. So problem, though, with Hank is he's at best on a team like the Avengers, the third or fourth smartest guy in the room, right? When you've got Tony Stark, you've got...
Tim, Tim, this is something that I hate that Marvel does, where because you see it with Amadeus Cho later, where I'm reading, he's like, he's the sixth smartest man in the universe. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Like,
it's a weird pecking order, right?
And they're like, Mr. Fantastic's number one, Tony Stark is number two. It's like, really, like...
Well, it's like the Illuminati, right? They're like, it's like, they got this whole pecking order of smart people that they have.
The smartest guys, who are just the decision makers and the major playmakers of the Marvel Universe. There is some appeal to that, but again, when the list starts at Reed Richards, and it's kind of a substantial drop down to, I don't know, depending on the day, Tony Stark or Bruce Banner. Then maybe Hank, unless Beast is on the team. Then you've got competition with Hank McCoy when he's actually in scientist mode, and it's just like there's just too many of these scientist characters, right? They need something else to differentiate them, and all of these other characters do, with the exception of Hank. And it's like, what are we supposed to do with this guy? He's a founding Avenger, like he should be really important and really popular, but he just sucks. He's a drag to write. And I think that's what Jim Shooter's attitude coming into this was. I don't think that Shooter necessarily set out to assassinate the character. I don't think he put a hit on Hank Pym. I'll put it that way. I think he was just trying to find a hook for this guy and realized that when you peeled back some of these layers, you could explore maybe there's like an inferiority complex here. And maybe he would be even more effective not as a hero, but as a villain. And I think that because Claremont and Byrne had sort of hinted around doing that with Jean Grey through the Dark Phoenix saga, and then ultimately backed off from that in the process of killing off Jean Grey, I think Shooter felt like they chickened out. I think he felt like they didn't commit to turning a hero who'd been one of the forebearers of the Marvel Universe into a villain. That would have been a ballsy move, and I think he would have been supportive of it. Certainly, you've had villains reform and become heroes. Why couldn't you have a hero become a villain? And I think maybe long term that was the direction Shooter wanted to establish for this guy. Now, it kind of goes off the rails early on.
Real quick.
Yeah, and I don't know whether I believe, and I want to get you guys just accounts, just your take on this too, because there's different accounts of what exactly happened here. So, in our first issue, Yellow Jacket and Wasp are basically returning to the team. It's a really good jumping on point for this series in that issue 212, right? A really small core group of Avengers. Tigra is there for some reason.
Yeah, that one I never really understood. Why is she here?
Well, she's only there for like one episode.
Yeah,
she has to fuck Jarvis the whole time.
But it's like, what's the peg that doesn't fit here? Like, she's just so random.
And I think maybe Shooter wanted to get rid of her pretty quick. I don't know how much of her he really wrote. Again, I'm not super well versed in Bronze Age into early 80s Avengers, right?
And that's one problem in doing it the way we did. Like, she just up and disappears, and I don't know what happens to her.
And that's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. And when you're reading this many issues at a time of a team book, especially, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we lose any important story elements, but we do lose some characters along the way. But they aren't important in the first place, so it's fine that characters come and go.
But we gain better ones.
We gain better ones by the end of this, yeah. So Tigra is a ridiculous character. She's a cat lady who
a horny cat
acts a horny cat lady. So she kind of acts like a cat, but at the same time it's like, is she just putting this on, or does she have some weird animal instincts? I don't know. It's very bizarre and kind of creepy the way that she's written.
And poor Jarvis.
Poor Jarvis gets harassed extensively by Tigra. It's God. And we'll just say, I mean, this is a good place to say Jim Shooter, I think, is a good plotter. I think he's got a solid grasp of just storytelling foundations. Hell, he'd been doing it since he was fucking 14 years old, writing Legion comics and Superboy comics for DC. It's insane the amount of comics he wrote when he was a minor child, and I have to imagine that violated some kind of child labor laws, but how do you account for it? Especially back then, when your job is writing comics as a teenager, right? It's not like it's hard labor, but he'd been at this for a while. He had a knack for solid storytelling, pretty good plotting. His dialogue, though, could be pretty ropey. And I don't know that that's just a byproduct of 80s comics were just like this, or if it's just, he didn't have a great ear for dialogue. But that's something that I think took some getting used to, right? Just the roughness of some of the dialogue here in these early issues, especially scripted by Shooter. Would you guys agree?
Well, I think, like, in the chat, like, one of the things that took me back immediately is Janet likes the word lover. And
Yes.
She doesn't refer to her as a husband or a man. It's like, hey, lover. And
Hey, lover. Yeah.
I have an aunt and uncle that refer to each other that way, and it grosses me out because, like, they live in, like, the 50s. So, like, every time they say the word lover, I
They live in the 50s.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a term like people from the 50s say it. So when I read it, I cringe when I see it. Like, I cringe reading it. I don't know. It might be, but it might be reflective of the times. I think you're right.
Again, maybe it wasn't that out of place in 1981.
Maybe not. But I never recall my parents saying the word lover to each other. I don't know.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
My mom and my stepdad refer to each other as mom and dad. Which
Yes,
that's weird.
Lover was
they have no children together, which is strange. But
no, they have your brother.
They didn't have him together. He came along before my mom was in the picture.
Goddamn shit.
Oh, the non-biological, yes, the non-human brother. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
It made me think of that Saturday Night Live sketch with Will Ferrell in the jacuzzi. Whenever I hear the word lava.
I
hate that word so much. I don't know. It
does make your skin crawl a little bit. It does.
It's gross. Anyway.
So anyway, these characters are returning to the team. The team is kind of getting settled, and we have these really lame stock characters, Gorn and Linnea, who are these like time displaced barbarians or something, and they just fell out of, like,
by the way.
Yes, in Northern Virginia.
Shenandoah Mountains, probably.
I can relate.
Have you run across these guys? Are they part of your social circle?
Certainly not one of them anymore.
Yeah, well.
I feel like we've seen this in other things, though, where you get these out of place or out of time visitors that act the way they think they're supposed to act, and they come off as like villains, and they're.
But it's so random. Like, they just show up. Like, it
has nothing to do with anything. Yes.
No,
they're just here. Like, they're here. Like, I don't know
what
why
they are is
Yeah.
they are complete ciphers. They're just a means to an end. They don't matter at all. It's just to get us to the point where Hank, Yellow Jacket, fucks up. He makes a big mistake in the heat of battle. As the battle is actually winding down, he attacks an opponent, this Linnea, who's like this kind of overpowered. These two characters felt like they fell out of a sword and sorcery fantasy kind of like Conan or something like that, right? And they just happen to show up in Avengers, which fine, whatever.
Or like a monster of the week on Buffy or something.
Yeah, exactly. And Linnea is this like super overpowered sorceress type, and she's sort of powering down. She's surrendering essentially, and Hank like blasts her in the back, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked.
Gets her going again. So he, foul on the court there, Hank.
Also, Captain America, pretty corny, right?
Oh yeah, I definitely have down here, like, unlike most writers, I think Shooter, he really does write Cap as like a crusty old man, in a way that just, I don't know, he like really seizes on that out of time aspect to him, where he's this old army guy from the 40s, but hasn't really adjusted yet. But I mean, he just exudes a lot of dad energy. Like you feel like this Cap wants to throw on some white New Balance sneakers and go out there and cut the grass. Like this is Cap in super dad mode, or even granddad mode. But he does have the requisite nobility and humanity that you want from Cap. Like he approaches this grief-stricken woman, Linnea, who's out of control with her raging powers, and he's very compassionate towards her rather than violent. And that little bit of kindness goes a long way until Yellow Jacket steps in and fucks it all up. I did feel like maybe we needed more of a build to this moment here it's like his first mission back, and already he's like making rookie mistakes,
And also, let's not forget the dude gets killed.
Yeah, like
well,
and then shit just goes away.
And she just goes away, exactly. So
it's like, what the fuck? You never see her again.
Gorn, the love interest of Linnea. Look, these characters so don't matter, but he just gets killed, in the course of this story. That's what leads to her rampage. But he so doesn't matter. Like the Avengers don't even really care about that. They weren't even really involved in that, right? So it was just like, all right, we need to calm this lady down, find out what the hell is going on here. Because I mean, they're as kind of thrown by this as we are as the readers. Not something they're expecting to deal with. And I don't know does this character ever come back? I have no idea. This may have been a one and done, just again to get us.
Ironically, one and done, just like Yellow Jacket in the Avengers.
Right. I mean, yeah, he comes back. This is his first mission after an extended period away, and he screws up royally. So badly, in fact, that the Avengers are going to court-martial him. So I don't know. Do we feel like this offense is so bad that he's going to get dragged in front of his friends, his colleagues, and we're going to do this whole trial by peer thing according to Avengers bylaw? Is this something did that track for you guys as, all right, does the punishment here really fit the crime?
To be honest, Captain America kind of came off as corny, like I said earlier, and it just.
You know what, Tim? I'm sorry, Scott. I was gonna say if what he had done had maliciously led to the death of what's his name, Gorn, like if he had done something that had led to the death of that guy, then I could have seen it being a bigger issue. Then it would have made more sense to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know. I just felt like this was all a bit abrupt for Shooter to bring back these two characters in the course of one issue and then be like, all right, he's out on his ass. We're going to drag him out for this court-martial because he screwed up. It felt like there could have been more of an escalation there. It felt like there could have been, I don't know, a better reason for it than these just made up on the fly, stupid sword and sorcery characters.
Yeah.
But the mechanics of how we get here are largely unimportant. That's not what Jim Shooter is interested in.
And the other thing I would say is leading up to this whole thing, Hank's just been a miserable prick, and he's been an asshole to Jan the whole time leading up to
this. We need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Hank, his character, has been, to put it lightly, extremely unlikable. Just really surly, really dismissive towards his wife, verbally abusive, I would say, before we even get to the real heavy part of this. He just is a massive, massive prick.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is the guy played by Michael Douglas in the MCU. This had to be shocking to, if anyone, like, again, is coming into this and their version of the character is really colored by the MCU. I mean, Andy, what did you make of Hank Pym in comics here as contrasted with your experience with this guy?
Yeah, well, he's, not as much as a focal point in the movies as Scott Lang is, right? And
Sure.
He's kind of like a little smart alecky, has some really great lines and doesn't come off as anything like he does in the comics. In the comics, he's kind of a dick.
Majorly so.
Well, a lot of them have
in these
flaws.
comics, at least.
Yeah.
Well, he's also not 70 years old either in the comics.
Right. He's not 70 years old, but as we're going to establish, he is older than a lot of his teammates. And I think that does kind of matter. But
they held him to a higher standard, so that maybe because of his infractions, he has a little less leeway because of he's a founding member and
right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe
he should set a better example.
Yeah, he should. This is Hank Pym, for crying out loud. He did this, that, the other thing, and he should be not acting this way and setting example for the less seasoned Avengers, I guess, so to speak, right? Because you don't want him going. If we let him go get away with this, who knows what could happen with the next time an Avenger gets out of line, right?
Okay, yeah, I follow you. So he sucks. He's the biggest douche like that you've ever read in comics, basically. And again, I don't know that how jarring that might have been for readers up to this point. Like if you'd been reading Avengers from the 60s through the 70s, was Yellow Jacket, was Hank Pym anyone's favorite character at this point? I don't know. I'm sure statistically he had to be someone's, but
he also had a mental breakdown at some point along the way.
He had several mental breakdowns.
Yeah, he had several mental breakdowns. Several mental breakdowns. Yes.
Which will be recounted throughout the course of this saga as well.
Yeah.
So he's stressing over this court martial, right? He's going to get dragged out on the carpet in front of his peers, and he has this. He's cooked up this secret evil plan, basically, and that plan. This is insane. So he's going to build a doomsday robot, which he has done in the past. It's called Ultron, and it became one of the Avengers.
Yeah, he already fucked this up once. It's like,
but this is such a great plan, though. Tim.
He already accidentally created a genocidal robot, one of the most evil villains in the entirety of Marvel Universe. So having not learned that lesson, I guess he's going to build another one, but this one is going to be fully under his control. In fact, only he will have the key to shutting this thing down. So he's going to concoct this whole fake conflict in the middle of his court martial. This thing is going to come rampaging in there, kick all the Avengers' asses, and then he's going to save the day because, unbeknownst to anyone else, he's the only one who knows the robot's weak spot to shut it down, right?
So he's basically Syndrome from The Incredibles.
Exactly. Yep. I'm glad you picked up on that. Yeah. So that had to be borrowed from this story, I feel like. Lifted from that story, really. So, steal from the best, right? Now, Janet, the Wasp, catches on to what he's doing here. Catches him in the lab. He's looking very haggard. And he kind of spills the beans. And she's like, "Oh, Hank, oh, lover." And she wants to stop him, right? She wants to both comfort him, to go to him and console him, but also stop him from doing this. And in a fit of rage, Hank slaps her, backhands her across the face, sends her flying in a just infamous panel. If you've seen no other scenes of Yellow Jacket from the comics, you've probably seen this panel. I will, from this point forward, refer to this as the slap, because I don't know what else to call it.
World.
Yeah, the slap that is heard around the comics world. There's a lot of background, just a lot of lore that feeds into this. So Jim Shooter insists that the way he scripted the slap on the page was for it to be unintentional, that Hank is having this violent outburst. He doesn't even realize that Jan is as close to him as she is in proximity, and he's just like wildly waving his arms, and he accidentally hits her just in like this fit of mania while she's trying to calm him down. Total accident, right? He doesn't deliberately smack her across the face, as is depicted here. And I'm not laughing because domestic violence is funny. I'm laughing over the absurdity of how this was apparently intended to be depicted and how it actually comes across, because it's really night and day. So the artist on this issue, Bob Hall, he says that, yeah, Jim did script it like that. It wasn't meant to be a deliberate, just blatant act of violence. It was supposed to be an accident, but that he personally was not a good enough artist to display like the subtlety that this scene really called for. Like, he just kept at it and he kept at it and he couldn't get it right. He made multiple passes at it. So he just kind of settled instead for, you know what I can draw is just really bombastic Marvel style action. So I'll just do this really over the top scene where he hits her. So I don't know if I buy that. Like, I don't know. Like, I've never been a comics artist. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like if you're a good enough artist to hit these deadlines month after month, you know how to convey subtlety and you know how to convey basic body language. Maybe it's not your best effort, but at the end of the day, like, you're trying to just, get it off to the printers. I get that, the deadline is looming, and that's going to, every minute that passes, like, that pressure is ratcheting up, and you're going kind of stir crazy trying to get this one scene right, and you're obsessing over it, right? You're getting in your own head and sort of spiraling. I know that feeling, but I just, given that, like, it's the difference between I won't put my best effort forward here, or fuck it, I'll just change the plot completely and have this character, this founding member of the Avengers, backhand his wife in a fit of rage. Just send that off, right? Like, how did he think that was going to fly? And yet it does. Shooter does approve it. Again, we got to keep in mind, he's not only the writer, he's the editor-in-chief. He could have said, what is this? I didn't script this. Redraw it. Or given it to anyone to redraw, right? And the Marvel bullpen. So what do you guys think? Are these guys full of shit when they say they didn't intend for it to come across this way? Are they trying to save face?
They're trying to save
the reaction.
Face.
So you think it was written fully with the intent of Hank slaps his wife, that's what Shooter wrote, that's what Bob Hall drew. And then they tried to backpedal.
Yeah, because in the next couple pages, you see that she has a black eye.
Correct.
So
that's it right
point.
there.
If they didn't, if they weren't, there would be nothing. But I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. But when they come in for the trial, when they come in for the trial, she has like, it's like a fucking Lifetime movie. It
is. Yep.
She has like the Jackie Onassis glasses, and
mm-hmm.
And then she takes it off like for dramatic effect. So if they didn't want it to be that bad, they just would have left it at that, or they would have like had more breadcrumbs.
It would have been like, they would have moved on from it and acted like it was an accident, even though readers would have been like, well, what the hell? He just knocked the shit out of her. But they would have not portrayed the aftermath that way, right? But the fact is, like you said, Jan's reaction to being struck is not of someone who was hit accidentally. It turns into, as you said, a very clear abuse situation. Not only that, the lead up to this,
he was verbally abusive the whole time.
He was already like on this, walking this fine line. So it's not like this just came out of nowhere. So if it was not intentional, boy, does it feel awfully coincidental that it fits right like a glove here, based on the story that was taking place immediately preceding it and immediately after it, you know? So I don't know. I think Shooter's trying to like have his cake and eat it too, where he's like, yeah, maybe I overstepped here, but I didn't mean for it to go that far, even though he really did, right? I don't know what he has to gain by sticking to that story today. Like there's not been the I don't know the tell-all shoot interview that reveals, yeah, we meant it to come out this way all along, right? But
Hey,
I don't know, for
Tim,
whatever reason they've been, yeah,
there's zero. I mean, it's just right. Like the
zero
way
doubt.
that happened, the way he's been an asshole, the black eye. There's zero doubt what they were trying to get across here.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind. I think Andy, you probably think the same thing, right? I mean,
Yeah. No, it was painted that way.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, the only thing that gives me pause is the fact that they have been Shooter and Bob Hall have both been very consistent in their recollections. Like they haven't changed their story over the years, and it just feels like at this point they'd be like, you got me.
Hey,
right?
Tim, what I will say, okay, so think about how this spans. It's from 212 to 230.
Yeah,
I think they might have had second thoughts as they got to 230 to that end game. But I think when they wrote it initially, they had no qualms about what they were doing. I think they realized they fucked up as they got into it later on. That's what I think.
I do too. Yeah, because you got to keep in mind the slap happens in just our second issue here.
Correct.
Yes. So very early on, Hank had been acting like the biggest dickhead in the world. Again, already verbally, emotionally abusive. Doesn't seem like that much of a leap for him to do what he does here. As detestable as it is, the writing is pretty, and the characterization is pretty consistent with the path that he had been on. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys. We're pretty much 4 for 4 and thinking these guys are full of shit when they say they did not mean it to come out that way. I think that's so.
And Jim Shooter hates women. I think we discovered.
Well, I don't know that.
Well, there's a lot of instances. There's a lot of instances in this arc that shows he does. I'm just saying that's how I
think he has some issues for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway,
it's also sort of telling that he's not even the writer who ends up finishing this story, right? He ends up handing it off to another, I think, ultimately better writer.
Correct.
Who gets a lot more out of this at the end of the day. I mean, look, this is great melodrama, I think, that Shooter is giving us, but is it, great storytelling? Is it right for the characters? Does it really add to or subtract from the possibilities and the ways that you can use these characters and tell stories with them? I think it's pretty reductive at the end of the day what Shooter has done, unless again his sort of end game was to turn Hank into a villain. I think you can do something with that, but he's never really said anything to the effect of that's where I was going with this. I'm not sure he knew exactly where he was going, other than I'm trying to find anything to make this character more interesting to the readership and more interesting to me as the author to write. So I'm maybe giving him too much credit when I say perhaps he was headed down this idea of turning Hank into a villain. Like, that's pure speculation on my part.
Yeah.
But anyway, the fact is, Hank Pym is a Stan Lee, Jack Kirby original. He dates to 1962. A pillar of the Marvel Universe. So this is a big deal, what they've done here. Like, I don't think people think of Yellow Jacket as like a major character today, but at the time, I mean, he really was. So again, all the more reason why Shooter and Hall have this motive here to obscure the truth behind their intent here. They're really like playing with fire here in these. These are people's favorite toys in the toy box, right? You can't just bang them together like this and break them and move on. This is crazy what's happening. But in the end, you get some pretty good, I think, moments for Jan, who had been depicted as kind of just an extension of Hank, kind of like this. I don't know. Again, you say, Sean, that Jim Shooter hates women. He does not write her as a strong character for the better part of this story until that court-martial scene where she really does step up to reclaim her agency. She basically confronts her abuser, confronts and combats this toxic masculinity, and she basically is punching Hank in the dick by proxy, the way she beats this robot, this rampaging robot during the court-martial.
Yeah, and he basically has a whole meltdown. Why did it have to be you? Like, he has this whole little crying fit about how she's the one that stopped it and just totally cucked them. That's what she did. Yeah.
He's such a bitch. Like, he
really is a total bitch.
It's bad.
It's like go away, like, to steal a wrestling term, it's like go away heat, or like the X-Pac heat, or whatever. Like, it's just like, I want this man to go away. And, Tim, I can bring it up now, or we can talk about it towards the end.
By all means.
Screw it, I'm going to do it now. This reason is him smacking her is the reason why he's not the main Ant-Man.
I kind of
in my opinion, because we would have hopefully new readers. I don't know if that's happened. Obviously, go back and look, and it's like, oh, who's Hank Pym? Oh, he's smacking his wife, and he's supposed to be
guy with this crazy amount of baggage. Yeah,
it's supposed to be our hero. And
I disagree, but I'll get to that later.
And I honestly think I said it at the start of this pod. It was a character assassination. And he hasn't even recovered to this day. And it's been 40 years now? 40 plus years?
Yeah, so the problem with this is, and I think that by the end of this story, steps have been taken to kind of rehabilitate him, but it's in a way that is ultimately packing off the character. It's saying you can't really be a hero anymore, but you don't have to be this villain or just a disgraced Avenger. You can gain a measure of grace here and ride off into the sunset, but that's going to be it for you, right? That's sort of where they leave things at the end of this. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but it doesn't matter. And when we do see Hank again later on, it's not as a superhero. It's more as a civilian scientist supporting character to, I guess, really the Avengers West Coast, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and you get some good material out of that, I feel like. That acknowledges where he had come from, and that sort of had acknowledged how far he had come, I should say. Excuse me. But then for some reason, like once you get into the 90s, every writer, once you get into like the 90s and the 2000s, every writer who comes along decides, I'm going to do the Hank Pym redemption story. And you can't do that without constantly reminding readers that he battered his wife, right? That he's a spousal abuser. When really, like, we've kind of, I don't want to say moved on from that, but we've moved on from that. Like, we've already told this story of, like, his rise and fall and rise again. But for some, it's like every new writer wants to put their stamp on this character, and it's just nobody seems to get that. No, we're done with this. We can really move on from it, but we can't, because this is the only thing that stands out in your mind when you think of this character, is him slapping his wife. I mean, even somebody like, again, I mentioned the Dark Phoenix saga. Jean Grey has come back from, as Dark Phoenix, annihilating an entire star system with like billions of anonymous asparagus people who were depicted as dying in just this, fiery scene of hell, and it was terrible, right? But they managed to kind of walk her back from that because people wanted to tell new and different stories with Jean Grey. I mean, I know the Phoenix comes back around over and over, but it's crazy that something like that doesn't stick to a character. We're talking the death of billions versus something which is much more personal and much more intimate.
It's because we didn't know those characters, but we know Janet.
And this is, yes, we know Janet, and this is also something that happens in real life, right? We don't have rampaging cosmic entities destroying millions of stars, to our knowledge. Maybe we do, but that doesn't affect our day-to-day lives the way that something like spousal abuse does, you know? So yeah, I think there's many reasons why he can't ever live this down. And I think attitudes towards abusers also, right? Like, once somebody hits their wife, it's like and I know we're dealing with some very sensitive subject matter here. They can get all the therapy in the world, but in the back of your mind, like, that carries a stigma, right? Whether it should or shouldn't, that's kind of what people think of. And certainly in the 80s, where this is becoming much, much more of an issue in probably contemporary American life, right? You can't do this and get away with it. Not anymore. And yeah, it's heavy stuff here for what is supposed to be a kid's comic still, basically. But that leads us to issue 217, which the cover is all but declaring this as a very special episode.
That's a good way to put it.
And I don't know why, because it's not, I mean, compared to what we've just been through, it's kind of pales in comparison, right?
But I would say the next one is the very special episode after this.
It is, well, yeah, the very bizarre episode, right? Yeah. So in 217, basically, we have this heist situation where Hank, who's already, been drummed out of the Avengers now, been totally emasculated before his peers. Again, I metaphorically punched in the dick by his now ex-wife. It's just very telling to me that the weak spot on the robot was like right between its legs. I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't think that was by accident that Jim Shooter wrote it that way. Anyway, he's down on his luck, to say the least, and gets roped into the scheme by his old villain, Egghead.
Okay, so can we really shit on the villain choice for this big arc?
Really shit on Egghead, but yeah.
Wow.
I like the Batman villain one day.
Well, that's what I was just saying.
I was about to say.
To me, I'm like, that don't look like no Vincent Price.
I mean, they could have really for this something like as important to this arc. You really thought they could come up with something better than Egghead? I'm just saying. I mean, anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I get the desire to pull somebody from Hank's own history, his own, which he had an actual rogues gallery back in the pages of Tales to Astonish. They are the most laughable collection of villains I think any prominent character has ever. They are absurd characters, right?
Yeah.
Egghead is kind of, I don't know, the best of the worst, maybe. But he completely sucks. He sucks, but he has this personal history with Hank Pym, so we're going to bring him back. So he kind of gets a major rub out of this, honestly. This former Ant-Man villain now getting called up to the big leagues in Avengers comics, and a lot of the rest of this story is going to pivot on Egghead and his scheming, which is just, it's very it just feels very Silver Age, right? It feels to me like Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, like in the first two Superman films, right? Where it's kind of this, I don't know, it's just very corny. This whole heist he's going to pull off by kind of suckering in Hank and his own niece Trish, who he's controlling remotely through a
that was ridiculous
artificial arm. It's
Sorry,
that's some
dying here.
That's some inventive
like
storytelling.
Idle Hands.
Yeah, right. Like he gives her this fancy robot arm, and then turns out, this was my scheme all along. I do think it's funny, though. Shooter actually does take some care to give us a plausible rationale why Trish's robot arm managed to pass inspection by Pym. You know, like, oh, well, I was able to manipulate it remotely, so, you know, there's nothing wrong with it when you checked it out, because he'd look stupid, right, for not examining this thing first, you know. So it's trying to, you know, paint Hank as not a total sucker here, but still, it's a very goofy sort of scheme. And yeah, we are basically going to be stealing the adamantium reserves, the adamantium resin from the Strategic Air Command here in the mountains. And this is so that Egghead can build awesome robots. Again, we're back to building robots that he's going to use to take over the world. So, of course, Hank is going to summon the Avengers to the scene here. Tigra is gone at this point, so we're down to a smaller, even smaller team now. And he's going to try to tell them, you know, hey, this is Egghead. I'm not, you know, this is not me. I'm not out of control here. I haven't lost my mind. But Egghead's like, no, look, I'm going to kill this girl if you don't take down the Avengers. I'm going to detonate the arm remotely. I'm going to blow her up. Oh my God. So then we get the great fight scene between Yellow Jacket and all of the Avengers, which this strained credibility for me because maybe he could get lucky against, I don't know, if he jumps, you know, Cap and Wasp, but what's he going to do to Iron Man? What's he going to do to Thor? He like drop kicks Thor. Are you kidding me? Like this is silly. This is foolish. But he makes a pretty good showing. Ultimately, that is for naught. Egghead was basically leading him along. He didn't have any secret evil plan to kill this girl. He just kind of dips out and leaves Trish with the post-hypnotic suggestion, I guess, somehow, that he is now programmed into her brain, that this was Hank's secret evil scheme all along. So it sends him to prison. I don't know. I will say I thought this was clever in the sense that I'm actually going to give Egghead some credit here, you guys. Can you believe it? That Egghead made sure that no matter how this situation turned out, he won either way. Even if he didn't walk away with the adamantium reserve so he can make his fucking robots, at least he took down his old enemy, Hank Pym. You know? I mean, this is a real win for Egghead over his greatest rival, I guess, intellectually and on the battlefield.
Well, Hank's kind of an idiot. So...
Well, I mean, he is.
He's only the seventh smartest person in the world.
Exactly. He's only the seventh smartest in the room. But this was I think that this story was maybe trying to put some sympathy heat on Hank after everything he'd been through. It's like,
but this still doesn't change the fact that he smacked his wife.
Exactly.
I want everything bad to happen to you and you only.
But I feel like this is where they said, okay, I don't know how far out they plotted what they were going to do. So this is what, 4 issues after this happened, right? So
this is our realize, 3rd issue we read, but it's 4 issues after the slap. Yeah.
Are they far enough ahead to realize they screwed up by the time they wrote this? And this is kind of where they're going to try to turn the corner, you think, Tim?
I think maybe. I think the idea was we're going to give Hank a little cooling off period. And the next time we check in with him, we're going to have him be not
because he's homeless, no money. He's like down on his luck, and
he looks pitiful, right?
The Avengers can't track him down. They don't know where he's at. They're like trying to make him look like this big sympathy victim, but the dude still smacked his fucking wife 4 issues ago. So I feel like here is where they're trying to make us forget all about that and make us, hey, let's feel sorry for this guy.
Yeah, so it's like now they've decided. Okay, Hank got to this point through his own actions, which he is still yet to take responsibility for. However, what happens in this one issue, you know, this whole heist with the adamantium and whatnot, there he is now a victim of circumstance. So are we now supposed to feel bad for him? Is that supposed to cancel out his earlier misdeeds? I don't know how we're supposed to, what our takeaway is supposed to be here. And where it goes next, I'm still like, again, I think maybe this is where Shooter, like you said, is starting to lose the plot. You know, he's got maybe too many plates spinning. He's got too much going on, given the fact that he's also editor-in-chief. And it's just, you know, he keeps going back to this, but he doesn't know where to end it. Anyway, that was sort of my take on, which I kind of liked this issue. Again, just I think there's, as much as there is some, you know, early 80s goofiness to it, I think it kind of holds up pretty well structurally in a weird way. So I was maybe a little bit of a sucker for this issue, even though it has massive problems just in terms of Hank still hasn't taken accountability, but Shooter's spin on it here, where it's like now it's almost daring us to sympathize with this guy, you know, and that's, I don't know, I feel like that takes some balls. I will say that much. It's not really that effective, but he goes for it. All right, and now we get to Sean, your favorite of the bunch here with
wow.
Oh my goodness. So again, this is not the next issue, right? We're taking another little break here.
It's like seven issues. We're jumping like 7 issues, 8 issues ahead. This is nuts.
Yeah, so we were at 217. Now fast forward to 224. Hank is in prison because of the events of this whole heist that he has been framed for, which he has been framed. This was not his fault. The Wasp is, you know, I guess their divorce has been finalized. She has moved on. She's trying to move on anyway. Tony Stark, meanwhile, is trying to move in. And this is basically just a romance comic. I don't know. There's no, like, and Shooter doesn't script it, by the way. This is the one issue that is scripted by Alan Zelenitz. Again, I don't know if I'm saying that name right. And I'm like, I almost took a step back and had to ask, is this a pseudonym for Jim Shooter? Like, who is this guy, right? Who I had seen the name, and I was like, is this just Shooter trying to, again, get some of the heat off of him? But I don't think so. Having looked into, again, Mike's Amazing World of Comics, which is an amazing website, you can look up creator credits, and this guy does have some issues to his name. It's like primarily fill-ins across a lot of Marvel books, but he also has kind of a lengthy run on Cull the Conqueror, of all things. So now we're back to Swords and Sorcery.
Wish he would have been cold.
Sir. He was the writer of the 20-issue Alien Legion. That's an epic.
That is an epic. Yes, it is.
Epic series, which I've never read, and I'm kind of curious what that is like. But yeah, it's stuff like Conan. It's stuff like Cull the Conqueror, Thor. Looks like he did a good bit of work with Moon Knight, of all characters. So he's got some stuff out there. But this was his. Okay, this issue was Alan Zelenitz's 4th credited story ever.
And it's probably his best piece of work ever, Tim.
I mean, look, we talk about the dialogue suffering in earlier installments. I think maybe he's got more of a knack for dialogue. Maybe this is, I don't know if this guy was Jim Shooter's neighbor or maybe lawn guy or what, but maybe Shooter said, why don't you take a crack at this? I don't really have time to write the script. And does he turn in quite the, again, romance drama.
Okay, Tim, let me just start off. Like, I got to say something. So this is the first Avengers comic book I had ever read.
Yes.
Ever. And immediately it starts off with the Avengers in this battle, and literally Janet's got all this confidence now, right? Like she's putting on this facade of confidence, and literally it's Stark as Iron Man in this battle looking at Janet and go, I just noticed how great Janet looks. Like this is like him saying, like, and he just takes notice that she looks all radiant, hot all of a sudden, and he's like,
I'd hit that.
Well, yeah, he goes, oh,
Basically,
I would hit that, and then randomly he finds out about this party Janet's going to be at later, along with all these socialites, and he goes, why not? And then it goes from there. It's insane. Like, he just goes to this party, and then randomly Janet's like, oh, Mr. Stark, the beneficiator or whatever of the Avengers, how would you like to dance with me? They dance on the floor, and then they go back to her place. They kiss on her front steps, and then this grand romance. And People Magazine, this guy with a pen. But by the way, was that Peter Parker?
Yeah, I think there were a few like kind of weird cameos in the.
For some reason, Prince Charles and Diana were at the gala hitting on Van Dyne. Prince Charles was.
But the guy with the pen, the picture pen, I think that was Peter Parker for the Daily Bugle. Took the picture of them together.
Right.
Then they ended up in People Magazine, and then they had this whole, and so they started this whole romance. Meanwhile, Tony knows that Janet is Hank's ex-wife, but she doesn't know that Tony Stark is Iron Man. So that's the whole thing of this whole comic, which is amazing.
Yeah. So various
Parker
Avengers
outside the party took a picture with a picture pen.
Inside the party, he
quite the alliteration.
Yeah.
Picture pen.
Yeah. Parker took a picture with the picture pen. Yes, Andy.
Sorry, I got to contribute something here.
Andy, that was amazing. That was very good. Very good. Peter Parker picture pen. Yes.
Now I really do want that to be Peter Parker, just so that is.
I almost thought it was. I thought it was.
It might be. Anyway. I don't know.
I mean, I have it up. It could be.
Does he say for the Daily Bugle?
No, he just says, holy cow, that's Jan Van Dyne with Tony Stark. My pen camera pics of those two arm in arm are sure to grab me page 1 of tomorrow's Daily Bugle.
There you go. I think it's Peter Parker.
Okay.
He has that Peter Parker 80s look as Spider-Man, as when he's Peter Parker.
He does, sort of, yeah.
I don't know.
I have written down in my notes, it's crazy to think that any child of the 80s would have been interested in this comic.
Okay, so I don't know why I was.
Okay.
It hooked me. For some reason, I don't know why it hooked me. It did. And I think it was the last image of the comic that got me. It's like, it hit me that this guy, Iron Man, who's this big hero, and again, I knew who Iron Man was, right?
Yeah.
But this big hero freaking railed his best friend's wife while he's in jail, and that last image of Hank Pym behind bars to close the issue, that was just so, like, the image just captured me. Like, what he had done to his friend while his best friend's in prison, God, Iron Man's like the biggest heel in this fucking whole, like, series. I don't know. It just, something hit me. I don't know why. And at a young age, it hit me really hard. I don't know why. I can't explain it.
Do you think it spoke to like an early love of soap opera and just kind of?
Okay, it might be because my mom, Tim, that's a really great analogy because my mom watched soap opera. My mom watched General Hospital a lot.
All right, there you go.
So every day after I come home from school or whatever, she'd be watching General Hospital, and I'd sit there and watch it with her. So it could have been some of that soap opera stuff, maybe a little bit, possibly, because the Avengers, from this point on, it was one big soap opera because every story interconnected at some point or another moving forward from here. For me,
yes, and I mean this is interesting to me because it's it's like we're just kind of checking in on this saga that's been taking place. It's sort of moved into the margins by this point, but now we're going to put a new spin on it and say, while Hank is in prison, this is how his ex-wife is getting on with her life. And we basically document this love story in its entirety from its inception to its end over the course of one single issue. It's like various other Avengers do know that Iron Man is Tony Stark, but she is not one of them.
So it's Captain America and Thor, right? I think they're the
Captain
only...
America and Thor know. Yeah. And I think of this roster, they are the only ones who know.
Correct.
And she does not.
I don't think they knew in Cap-Wolf, if I can remember. Right? Did we read? There was something we read, and I was like, oh, nobody knows who he is.
Well, Iron Man was not in.
He wasn't in that. I remember seeing it somewhere. Maybe it was the beginning of this. I don't know. I'm confused.
Yeah. And it was a different Thor by that. So, I mean, you know, you also have to take into account all the various times that these heroes have maybe gone public with their identities and then said, no, I'm going to use a mind erasing device to make everybody forget that. So I don't think that's happened too many times, if at all, at this point in Marvel Comics, but that is a thing that happens sometimes. But anyway, so it's kind of skeevy because unbeknownst to Janet, she is dating one of her ex-husband's best friends. But I also think just on the level of she doesn't know his identity. She doesn't know this is someone she works with, whether or not he does have a relationship with Hank. It's a power dynamic, right? It's he has information that she doesn't, and he's withholding it. And in the context of a relationship, that's kind of gross, right? That's not cool. So even if you take the friendship with the ex-husband element out of the equation, it's still not a good look.
Yeah, and they insinuate they have sex, obviously.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're getting it on. Definitely.
And then it gets to a point where when Cap sees the magazines, Cap cuts quite the promo on him, which is awesome.
Sure does. Yeah.
Yes.
So Cap takes Tony to task to the point he basically shows up at Tony's, brownstone in the city. Tony's not home because he's off romancing Janet. And Cap, we don't see this, but you have to imagine all panel cast going, I'll wait.
Yeah.
He sits down and he sits his ass down for the next 6 hours, long into the night, until Tony gets home and says, listen, motherfucker.
Was he Forrest Gump waiting on the bench for his kid? What the hell?
No, this is Cap, and again, this is Cap in dad mode, right?
I love that. Now that also caught me. I love this because another thing that captured me about this episode was Cap. This is what a hero does. Like, he totally just fucking ripped his buddy and said, you know what? How the fuck can you do this, you motherfucker? And I fucking love that. That was great.
I will say it's a little bit, and this is very telling of the time period also. It's not framed as how can you do this to Jan, right? It's how can you do this to Hank?
Exactly.
To our great friend Hank, who's in jail, who's in prison for treason.
By the way, punched her in the face and gave her a black eye.
Yes. It's now still everything is about these Avengers, these former teammates, bending over backwards to protect their friend who's a scumbag. But it reads like some real sort of thin blue line shit, right?
It momentarily made me forget that he was a wife abuser, by the way, because that freaking last panel with him behind the bars, it hit home and it made you forget almost that, like, if you didn't know it, like if you had read way back in 213 that he had punched her in the face, here in 224 you almost would have forgot that because of what Tony did to him. And that's how they controlled the narrative of that really, really well in this, by the way.
I honestly thought it was going to make him more of a villain. Like, this would be like more of his villain origin story.
Motivation.
And it would have totally made it more motivating because he looked like he was super pissed in that panel at the end, right? So, yeah.
Because he knows who Iron Man is, right? It's just, so he gets what's going on here. So I don't know though, but it's screwy because everything's still about Hank's feelings, Hank's pain, Hank's fragility, his fragile masculinity, his no real acknowledgement of his accountability. Right? We're still not getting that, and that's
hey Tim, I'm curious. So now that this issue coming into this issue, this was like the big shocker issue that I thought was pretty cool. So I'm curious what Schiff thought, and then what Andy thought reading this issue about Tony Rail's plots.
It's a change of pace. What do you guys make of this? It's a change of pace. Schiff, I
kind of enjoyed it because it got away from the usual trappings, and it was very, like you said, soap opera. But I'm a wrestling fan, which they said for years, wrestling was a male soap opera. So I was okay with it. I did like the People magazine, how they were on the cover of that, because it made it feel more real instead of like we're in this other world. They're like, oh, it's just like us, like, with Princess Di and Charles, which Charles is pretty fugly. Look at his kids. But
yeah.
But I did like how it made it feel like a real world situation there, and it made it feel like we weren't in like another universe, like this was ours. So I was okay with it.
It brought it down to earth a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I was fine with it. I mean, I thought it. It made it. Go ahead. No.
I can ask this later. What's your take on it?
It just, I wasn't shocked based on how Tony Stark is portrayed early on in the MCU. Kind of like I would expect something like that maybe before his near death experience, right? With before he becomes Iron Man, like that Tony Stark would nail his best friend's girl kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised by it. Did I expect it? I don't know. I mean, Janet's all over the place in this thing.
She sort of is, which I'm a little sort of forgiving of, because she's sort of like in the process of finding herself through the course of this too, which, by the way, she's now like the Avengers chairperson. Right? Yeah, which is a gimmick with the Avengers, where periodically they have their little meetings and they decide to vote on a chairperson, and it's supposed to be a rotating position, but whoever has the job can basically say, I'd like to keep the job if you all still have confidence in me, and they all say aye or nay, and occasionally that leads to conflict and disagreements. But in the early days of the Avengers, everybody was like, okay, I'll lead this mission, then it'll go to the next person, then the next. And it's only been, kind of within this later era of Avengers where they have more long-time, full-time leaders, which Janet is now stepping into that role because she's trying to get past, her relationship with Hank and say, who am I as not just an Avenger, as a superhero, but as a person who's not just chained to my husband, which she had been for much of her existence. And again, this is where I think we get some good material. If anything, like, this is a nice way to. I shouldn't say a nice way to. I mean, she gets slapped in the face, and that's never a great way to, boost a character, boost their prominence. But I think she comes out of this better for it than anybody, really.
Yeah.
But we'll kind of get.
Yeah, I think we'll make all these other movie references. It could be called How Janet Got Her Groove Back. She's like behaving like a divorced woman, like out there living her life and just being strong and doing things that she wouldn't have done had nothing happened between her and Hank, right? Would she have become leader of Avengers? She would have become, this tabloid, so to speak, figure. No, she would have just been, it's Hank Pym's wife, Janet, kind of thing. So she got out from underneath his shadow in this arc.
The last thing I would say about this issue is when Tony finally feels guilty and gives the great reveal, and she acts all shocked. But like literally, the end of it is basically her saying, "Well, you go on out without me tonight. These heels are hurting my feet," and that's kind of the end of the relationship. That's it. They're done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like anticlimactic ending to the relationship. It's kind of weird. I don't know.
Well, she doesn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing the extent to which he's really hurt her.
I know. Yeah.
A lot of this is about her putting up walls and not letting even well-intentioned people in, because look what happens when she does show vulnerability. She is literally abused for it. So it's her just being like, nope, he's never going to see me cry. I'm the leader. I'm basically his boss in the Avengers. The last thing he's going to do is make me cry, so he can go fuck himself. Basically.
I would have really liked to see, I guess I would have liked to see a little more play out, because I mean, kind of what he did was a lot more dickish, and the forgiveness factor of that probably should have played out a little bit.
Very underhanded.
I was really underhanded, and I don't think there wasn't enough skin on the bone in terms of her reaction to that, I think, for me. So
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe more story to be told there.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a one and done kind of scenario at that point, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I will say, for Tony's part, you do throughout the course of just the thought bubbles, which are so prominent in this era.
Sure.
You see his conflict. Like, he knows that this is wrong, that he needs to tell her. He starts to tell her at various points, and it'll be like, what the hell am I doing? Just say it, and he won't do it.
You know what he was doing? He was thinking with his wrong head, like most men do in that situation. So.
Yep. But anyway, we so after that little diversion, we're in the home stretch now. Okay,
Yep.
So we're coming in now, issue 227. We're going to do 227 through 230. So 4 issues here. Roger Stern has now taken over so Jim Shooter is out. He's still the editor-in-chief, but he's no longer plotting or scripting the Avengers. It's all Roger Stern, who is a very, very capable writer. He's going to have a long run on this series. Again, he's previous to this, he's done Spider-Man. He's kind of been all over the Marvel universe. I will just say it's very telling to me that a new writer comes in and takes the first 4 issues of his own run to essentially clean up somebody else's mess. That's dedication to me, right? Because you want to hit the ground running. You want to make an impact. You want to make a statement when you're coming in as the new hotness here. And what does he do? He devotes his first 4 issues, that's 4 months of storytelling in comics. That's not insignificant, to getting past all of this crap, right? And to trying to salvage this into a workable story and a true character arc, which I think he kind of succeeds in. I'll just go ahead and say, remarkably enough, I think where we end up at the end of this, you can look at it from end to end and go, that was a character arc, right? However many diversions it took to get there, it all kind of makes sense and feels consistent in the end, right? Even with this change in writers here. And at this point, the team roster has changed a little bit more. We've got She-Hulk. She's new to the Avengers. And we have Hawkeye, who is...
They run through these, Avenger people, like Tony Stark, like Andy said, was banging randos in Iron Man 1 and 2. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but She-Hulk, but they're here for a while, so...
Yeah, they are going to be here. Well, yeah, Hawkeye, maybe not quite as much. He's going to go off to, Avengers West Coast, I think?
What's really great about this Hawkeye run is this, whole arc for Hawkeye leads to his first limited series, which is also one of my all-time favorites, by the way.
So I have a question. Yeah. I'm glad that, and this is a good segue, I feel like, because I know you're a big Hawkeye fan.
I am, yes.
When I was doing the Marvel Age podcast way back in the day, we're reading Marvel comics from the beginning, from the 60s.
Yeah.
I remember my initial exposures to Hawkeye were not positive.
The whole carnival thing, and when he's a bad guy with swords.
The carnival thing, and yeah. But even when he reforms and becomes a hero, he's as unlikable of a character as Hank Pym in our first issue of this. He's like a sexist pig. He's the biggest asshole.
He really is an asshole. He is.
And he's still an asshole here in the
asshole.
And I'm like, I thought maybe he had gotten past that at this point, but it still feels like that same, not as bad as 60s Hawkeye, but still.
So
he's this chode. So is this where he starts to turn around?
Yes. 100%, because as you see this arc play out, as we get to the final kind of how it plays out, what happens with him and Egghead and Hank and what he does in the final kind of deal, you kind of see like this guy's a real hero and he's a stand-up guy, and which leads to his whole mini-series where he's kind of a sexist pig in that, but then he ends up at the end with Mockingbird and that whole like thing.
Right.
So yeah, this is kind of like,
and she kind of humbles him, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of like his whole redemption arc starts kind of here a little bit, which I kind of like. Like it's his whole character development.
Yeah,
here. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. By the end of this, it almost turns into a Hawkeye story.
Exactly. So that's kind of, again, this is where I really started reading Avengers. So my love for Hawkeye really started here, Tim.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I had. I was like, man, Hawkeye still really sucks at this point. But by the end, it's sort of like he's feeling a little bit like more of the Hawkeye that I recognize, again, from the 90s. And
so what you're getting from me in this arc isn't just because of this crazy arc, but you're also starting to see some of my love for some of the people that I love as comic characters started with this arc, like Hawkeye being one of them. So
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I know I talk about how I really dislike MCU Hawkeye because he's not at all like comics Hawkeye. Well, I would take MCU Hawkeye over the first few appearances of Hawkeye.
He is absolutely an unlikable prick, and what he does to poor She-Hulk when she.
Oh man,
he's such a cocksucker to her later on.
He really is. Yep.
Yes, he is for sure.
Schiff, were you kind of taken aback by this characterization of Hawkeye at this point? Again, compared to what I'm really maybe used to.
Yeah, like him being like so sexist was like, I mean, I know it's the 80s, but goddamn, like.
Yeah, he was even worse than most.
It's just like, you know, I'm not trying to like how people like try to go back and like say, oh, this was bad bad now. You got to think of a different mindset back then, but this felt like it was like a 60s comic, like a Mad Men or something, like the way he was like talking to her. It's like women should be, you know, but it was not the same. And, you know, it's not even like the first time I saw Hawkman in my run, because it's when he had been killed with Avengers Disassembled, was when he was asked by Tony Stark to be Captain America. And like, he was basically, fuck you, Tony. But, but it was, it's a complete like 180 from that, and I was just like, damn, Hawk. At first, I thought like he wanted to bang She-Hulk or something, and I was like, that's why he's being a dick. He was negging her, but that obviously was not the case.
Right, Andy, you're probably more used to MCU Hawkeye, Jeremy Renner Hawkeye. This is a far cry from that, is it not?
Yeah, quite. So, I mean, he comes in kind of a douche, basically. And I was like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, because it's the costume, maybe, that I'm like, oh, this is a different Hawkeye.
I love
the costume.
I love the costume. Yeah. Love the costume.
It's very striking. Yeah.
Yeah.
This issue also serves as the introduction, not the first appearance of Monica Rambeau as Captain Marvel, but I think it's just like her second appearance.
Her second appearance after the Spider-Man annual. Yeah.
The Spider-Man annual. So she is now an Avengers trainee. Not to get off on a whole thing, but I'm just going to say, if Captain Marvel, as presented here, if this exact same comic was published today, as written, Captain Marvel would be considered an OP, Mary Sue, forced diversity, woke character, right? It would be that whole bullshit argument, right? But, because there are no politics in comics until fucking 2015, according to these people, like, she gets a pass. It's
Let
just
me tell you something. I thought, at the time, listen, to put someone brand new into the Avengers, even as and I like the way they put him as an Avengers trainee, right? And her, that Spider-Man annual I read, I was reading Spider-Man at the time, and her debut was a big deal at the time. Yeah. But I think from a debut character, I think she's really well written and really well placed, and I think I think they did a really good job for a character debut. I liked her, Tim.
I like her. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of this character. I just had to point out the hypocrisy and just how disingenuous that stupid argument is every time it's used today. And it's like, this has always been the case in comics. There's always new characters.
Well, that's what I love about when they're like, they're forcing politics in comics. Like, did you fucking ever read the X-Men, you morons?
Right. But for Andy and Shiv, for you guys, again, here's another character that you guys have seen in the MCU universe that was basically debuted. Here you go. In this arc right here.
I mean, did we really see her as her character?
They haven't gone
no, but you will in the Marvels.
Well, yeah, I'm familiar with her a little bit now.
But you will see her in the Marvels, but she won't be Captain Marvel. I think she's going to be Photon. I think is what her name will be in that.
Probably, yeah. They'll probably use, yeah. But it's interesting because her connection here is not to Carol Danvers in the comics. Right. She doesn't even have a relationship with the late original Captain Marvel. It's just she gained these powers, and she was actually like a police captain, right?
New Orleans police captain,
a New Orleans police captain, and that's why she's a legitimate captain. And it's like, well, he's dead. You've got these spectacular powers. The world needs a Captain Marvel, right? So
it's kind of stupid. The name, it's kind of dumb, but
I mean, it is. But at the same time, and really, it's Marvel wants to retain the IP, the trademark, right, to this name, Captain Marvel. But it's like, sure, it's not in use right now, so here you go. But in the MCU, it's because she does have this connection to, again, not Marvel, but Carol, who is not Miss Marvel, but Captain Marvel in the MCU. So it's interesting, just the way that they've kind of reconfigured that for the MCU. But I am looking forward to see what they do with her. I've always really, because I have read a good bit of this Avengers run, which she is a prominent member throughout. And I've always just really enjoyed her character. I agree. She's very well written and comes across as extremely likable, which, imagine you introduce a new character and you want them to be likable. Of course you do, right? It kills me the way that people will climb trees to find negative things to say when they feel like there's some agenda being put forth, when really this is just storytelling, folks. This is how it goes. This is how it works.
Yep.
Anyway, we are gonna get this interesting trip down memory lane now with Hank while he's in prison. He's being visited by the he thinks is just a prison psychiatrist. I guess really it's a guy who's been hired by Tony to determine is he even competent to stand trial, because Tony feels so guilty still about what he's done with Jan and Hank's situation that he's trying to give him a lot of legal aid essentially while he is in prison, that unbeknownst to Hank, this is all being funded by Tony Stark, right?
But in the meantime, we have still forgotten that he punched his wife in the face.
We still have not reckoned with the fact that he punches his wife in the face, although that is going to come up in a very interesting way.
It does for sure. It does, yes.
And so he is basically recalling his origin through a series of flashbacks and just his early adventures to this psychiatrist. This is very interesting to me because we've gotten to this place where we've basically broken the character, right? And now Roger Stern, as the new writer, has come in and has decided, I think I'm going to try to salvage this character, or at least get him to a good place, even if I'm not going to include him anymore as a member of the Avengers. So I think Roger Stern is using the techniques of deconstructionist storytelling in superhero comics, which was not a thing yet, right? That whole Watchmen approach of let's take this team, this character, this concept, let's hold it up to a microscope, and just dissect it bit by bit, break it down, see how it holds up to scrutiny or not. We've kind of already done that. So he's using those same techniques to rebuild this guy, which I don't think is something that had really been done a whole lot in at least early 80s mainstream superhero comics. So over the course of this, we get Hank's own version of his life story, I guess. And I don't know. I think
real whiny. He's like, "Woe is me."
A little bit, but at the same time, you can tell that this is Roger Stern's way of trying to declutter and make sense of a lot of just the nonsense in this character's history, like trying to smooth over some inconsistencies by providing character-based rationalizations for the things that just did not really add up, whether that's due to poor writing in the past or just aging really badly because these were 60s comics. But he stopped short of doing a flat-out retcon, which, so this is not Roger Stern saying, hey, this thing that you think you know about the character never happened. Here's what happened instead. Like, he's still owning the facts of this character's existence, but sort of reframing them, recontextualizing them. And I think that's a very interesting approach. The only other time I can think of around this same period that I saw that done, and Sean, maybe you remember, I keep going back to fucking X-Men and Dark Phoenix, but the issue after the death of Phoenix, where it's her funeral, right? And it's basically just Cyclops reflecting on their relationship and their history, and by extension, the history of the X-Men. Mm-hmm. It sort of does the same thing that I think this whole sequence does, where it's like, hey, we're going to streamline, we're going to simplify a lot of things, we're going to distill and really debulk a lot of the crap, a lot of the baggage here, make it presentable and accessible for newer readers, and maybe have some new information revealed. So,
well, I know for one, like, they did this whole thing about Hank, like, he had a wife before Janet. Like,
he had a wife before Janet, and they acknowledge how fucked up that like it was this woman who gets killed, and that's what sort of motivates him to throw himself into his research and ultimately become a superhero. And then when he meets Jan, she looks very similar to this first wife, and yet she is significantly younger. That's where
it's real creepy. It's like some
it flags up that Hank is like this older, you get the impression he's like probably like maybe twice her age, right?
I felt it was like 40 and 20, but it felt like he kind of gripped her. Like, that's the vibe I got.
And if you've ever read the original, like the first issue of the original Avengers, you kind of got that vibe right away, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and it's sort of like, ooh, and even the psychiatrist is kind of like, you didn't really, like, some red flags here. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think it's also very telling that Hank's history at this point is so messed up that his creation of Ultron just barely qualifies as a footnote in this whole saga, right? But understandably, he acknowledges that adds to his insecurities. So we're getting like a lot of psychology 101 here through the superhero storytelling. I have written down a quote. So what ultimately leads Hank to marrying Janet is when he is exposed to this gas that causes him to enter like this fugue state. This is one of his many nervous breakdowns, right? And over the course of this is how he develops the Yellow Jacket alter ego. That started out as kind of like a split personality sort of deal. It wasn't that, over the course of a few issues, but that's how this whole thing started. And it was played at the time as Janet taking advantage of that because Hank had cold feet and wouldn't marry her. Mm-hmm. But Yellow Jacket was so much more assertive, and he's like, of course I'll marry this hot broad kind of thing. And all Hank can say about this, in his own defense, so to speak, which it's not, he says, I guess even some psychotic episodes can be beneficial.
Great.
So even though his second marriage was born out of a psychotic break, he sees it ultimately as a good thing. And then towards the end, like we're seeing, like there are scenes depicting all of these things that he's talking about via flashback, with the exception of one, and that's the slap, right? It's towards the end. It's like and by the way, I also hit her. Can you believe that? Mm-hmm. And we don't see it again because they know we better not show this because it's going to all come flooding back to people just what a shithead he was and how terrible and personal and deeply unforgivable this is. So we're not going to show it, but we will have him actually acknowledge it, which is something he hasn't done in many, 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 many issues. No issues, in fact, up to this point. So it's kind of the first building block towards, all right, at least he can say that it happened and that he did it, and he regrets it. Where are we going to go from here? So I think in a lot of ways, this first issue by Roger Stern is a turning point. I don't know. Did you guys make of that what I did, where it's like they tell us, but they take care not to show it, and that's just in contrast to the rest of this.
It felt like you can definitely tell a new writer had taken over because they're like, oh, we got to get this guy on track. The old writer kind of fucked him up. Yeah. But the damage was done. Like, there's no coming back. Like, it would have been an okay villain story. What they should have done, I know Sean's going to hate me for this, they should have done the Hal Jordan route where, Hal goes crazy after Coast City is destroyed and literally almost
has a possession gimmick.
Yeah,
is that when he becomes Parallax or whatever the fuck?
Yeah, that's when he becomes Parallax. And then they write him off by like he sacrificed himself in a story, and then he came back as the Spectre and worked his way back up to becoming Hal Jordan again through comics ways. And I can't. It's a lot. We probably went pretty long tonight, but they should have did something like that. Just put him on the back burner because doing this and like still bringing it to the forefront, it's best just to forget it. But if they just would have like, hey, Hank's in like, Turks and Caicos helping kids or some bullshit and just write him off there. Like, just be done with him and don't try to do this retcon to be like, well, she sort of took advantage of him when he had this mental break and forced him to marry because dude still seems pretty fucking creepy when he's, I'm not saying you can't fall in love with you're 40 and she's 20, but it seems like
sure.
You're her. But
yeah, it reads very badly, especially in light of his his subsequent behavior here that we know about. I don't know. I think it's, you can read between the lines and see how this is selectively emphasizing certain things but de-emphasizing others. It's like again, the guy's already been taken apart. The action figure is in pieces, right? And this is, rather than a deconstruction of the character, it's almost like a reconstruction at a time when these conversations weren't even really happening in comics, and these narrative techniques weren't even really being employed. It just feels like an early example of where comics are going to be going, especially by the late 80s, right? So I don't know. I thought this was a low key, like, you wouldn't think so on the surface, but kind of an influential issue in its own way. And this is again 227. So wrapping things up with 228 through 230. I mean, this is more. Those issues are more like kind of standard superheroics, more of what you would expect from Avengers comics. You know, we're gonna now have the actual. Finally, we're getting to the literal trial of Hank Pym. So he is, before he takes the stand in his own defense. Egghead strikes with his team of the Masters of Evil. Now I don't know which incarnation of Masters of Evil this is. They've been through a lot of rosters. Now they're being led by Egghead, and you got guys like Tiger Shark and Shocker. Moonstone is in there, founding member of the Thunderbolts, along with the Beetle as well. So I kind of marked out seeing them.
So Tim, isn't this
Thunderbolts
the first isn't this an iteration of the Masters of Evil that plays out?
Yeah, they're literally referred to as Masters of Evil. Yep.
Okay. Yep.
A very corny name, but they are longtime Avengers villains. So I imagine them, seeing any version of them would have been a big deal to readers. It's like, oh shit, they're back, right?
Under Egghead.
Under Egghead. So this will be a short-lived version of the team, mercifully. So they're going to whisk Hank away, and here's where it gets a bit ropey, because they're going to try to manipulate him into joining their ranks, and it's basically Hank pulling a Tony Stark on them, right? Where Tony's supposed to be building weapons for the enemies that have taken him hostage, and he ends up building a weapon for himself, aka Iron Man's origin. But this is Hank doing the same thing, and he turns the table on them, and he becomes the hero that I guess he never thought that he could be, right? Has these guys on the ropes. We do get like a decent little fight with the Avengers. She-Hulk kind of gets her shit rocked. Radioactive Man, right, joins them, and he hits her with a gamma burst, turns her back into poor, pitiful old Jen Walters, and that's where we get, like you said, Sean, the scene of Hawkeye, kind of.
First she does the thought bubble where it's like, wow, she's really a weak woman. Like, it's a thought bubble. It's like
so
really
bad,
it's bad, really bad.
Very judgmental, very, again, misogynistic.
Because Hawkeye never fucked up, right?
Right.
But it's like the thought that he's thinking it. Yeah, like he doesn't say it out loud, but he's thinking about, like, he's just, what a weak woman. I'd rather have her be She-Hulk than this, like, piece of shit. Like, it's like really wrong. Like how,
because he had a lot of very shitty attitudes that were directed towards her. Again, not out loud, but in thought bubbles. When she was She-Hulk, he's like,
awful.
I don't know how I feel about all these broads on the team now, kind of thing. And it's just like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Who let the women in here?
Exactly. That's how he sounded.
And y'all glanced over too, like Reed Richards and Sue Storm show up for like 2 pages. So
they have
like lunch at Tavern on the Green.
Tavern on the Green, yes, they have lunch with Janet, which. Yeah, that scene was a little weird too, where it was, they're catching up with their old friend, and they're so worried about her, and they're like, "Oh, Jan, why don't
they got put in there just to get put in, like how the Muppets are trying to squeeze the Swedish Chef in every movie,
It's just a very Marvel thing. It's just their way of reminding you, hey,
they're here.
Yeah, they just, and again, it doesn't really serve anything here other than to remind us that Janet is this, impenetrable fortress still. But what do they expect? I mean, what do they want her to do? Shit, like, get over it. She's doing her best here. But anyway, this whole thing ends with the conflict with She-Hulk. She's stuck in her human form. She can't transform back, which she prefers, by the way, being She-Hulk. That's how this character is depicted. This is her early days. She had a solo series, in fact, prior to joining the Avengers. It went for about 25 issues, and then they stuck her in the Avengers. So she very much prefers being She-Hulk, and so this is hell for her. Hawkeye snaps her out of that with some tough love, right? He basically berates her into getting mad and turning back into She-Hulk, which
and a little tiny Jen Walters smacks him a few times, and then the next panel you see him fly through the door.
Yeah, you just see him go flying.
I did like that. That was pretty fun.
That was pretty cool. Yeah.
Good visual, good physical comedy there, I thought. But still not. I mean, I guess he solved the problem in his own Hawkeye sort of way, but he ain't all there yet as far as being a virtuous character.
No.
But ultimately, it is going to be Hawkeye who really saves the day, because after Hank has sort of had his way with the villains, Egghead is closing in on him. He's pulled a gun on him while Hank has his back turned, and Hawkeye sees this, shoots the arrow, which goes into the barrel of the gun just as it's fired. The back, I guess it backfires, and that, and it's some kind of energy weapon, right? This is not like a conventional pistol or anything. And there's a big flash of energy, and oh shit, Egghead is now dead.
Hawkeye killed Egghead.
And I like how
Hawkeye killed Egghead.
Was kind of depressed with it after it. He was like, I can't believe I killed him.
Good about it. Yeah, he did not feel good about it.
It's like you were shooting an arrow at a guy. What the fuck did you think was going to happen, dumbass?
So it was a weird transition. So that was the end of 229, and the 230, like the artistic value. So Tim, just a quick question. You might know this. So the artist from 229 to 230 changed, right?
I can tell you right now. So 229 to 230. Nope. We actually had Al Milgrom from 228 to he did the last 3 issues. Although,
because it looks like, because I will tell you, I thought like 230 was just done.
I did too.
I thought it was the opening page on 230 with him standing over Egghead, and like that whole thing was just awesome. I love that front.
Yeah. I thought that was a different artist too. It looked like they went back to Bob Hall, but it wasn't. Apparently it was Al Milgrom. Al Milgrom was like a kind of a jack of all trades, a Marvel staffer throughout the 80s and much of the 90s too, I think. And he was an editor, he was an occasional writer, an occasional artist. Like he kind of just did whatever they needed him to. And I think he was just very, very good at emulating that house style as an artist. And so maybe he just a little bit more time to spend doing 230. Like, hey, you've got a week to do 228. You've got 3 weeks to do 230. Like he knew he wasn't quite as rushed there. It's maybe the impression I got, because it does look better. That last issue,
it's like he took his time with it. Artistically, looks really, really good.
Yeah, noticeably improved over the previous 2 issues, really.
Correct.
Yeah, I picked up on that too, and I did think it was somebody different, but nope, Al Milgrom through the last 3 there.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, and 230 serves as more of an epilogue at this point. Like the story is over. I mean, the Masters of Evil are have been rounded up. They're actually going to corroborate Hank's story and say, yeah, this was all set up by Egghead. We've even got this special device that was invented by Tony Stark, who, by the way, completely just
disappears. Yes,
exited stage right.
Went to rehab
towards the end of this thing.
No, he did go to rehab. He's actually an alcoholic at this point, I think.
Yeah, I want to say in his own stories, he's in his own series, he's kind of going through it. I'm trying to think.
Yeah. I actually think he's a full-on
demon in the bottle.
No, that was early. That was a little bit
early.
earlier, but that's not the only
also
time.
covered in another pod, I think.
Yes. Yeah, which shall not be named.
Yes.
But no, I mean that was not his first and only episode of alcoholism. So, all right. So, what is going on in Iron Man comics at this point? I'm curious now. Let me look at Mike's World, and so Iron Man 166, Denny O'Neil, Luke McDonald. Yeah, I think this is
Denny O'Neil. Didn't he write the heroin story for?
My Ward, Speedy's a junkie. Yes.
So he's writing Iron Man's drunk now too.
Pretty much. I mean, none of these are jumping out at me but yeah, I mean, he did a lot of that alcoholism and, yeah, I think that something was going on in Iron Man comics that pulled him out of the Avengers for sure. Because for him to just disappear like that in the court, and we get no explanation for it, right? If anything, the characters are as kind of in the dark as we are as readers. So, and it's odd that they don't at least give us a footnote saying, "Hey, if you want to know what's up with Iron Man, check out blah blah blah." Anyway, all that is to say, and again, nothing's jumping out at me looking at these covers. As far as, yeah, we're getting to that era where
there it is, 160, 169, 169.
Yep.
It's titled Blackout.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the cover shows him pretty fucked up.
And the very next issue after that, you see someone taking off the helmet, and clearly it's Rhodey.
It's Rhodey, yeah. So that's definitely, yeah. There you go. We're right there. Yep. Yeah.
So he's fooked. He's fooked on alcohol.
Yeah.
I'm glad we sussed that out. Before that happens, though, he invents this little device that it's like a football helmet. You put it on your head, and it basically determines whether you've been subject to mental manipulation. It's like a mind control. It's a mind control detecting device. Yeah. And so they use this to get various people off the hook. It's like, so they use it on Trish, Egghead's niece, who had been previously manipulated. And it's like, oh my God, he was mind controlling her all along and planted these thoughts, these fake memories in her head. And so they do that with her, and Hank actually volunteers as well because he wants to know, was this someone, an enemy, manipulating me externally to act the way I did, or was I in full control of my own faculties?
Nope,
when I hit my wife. So this is a pretty important question, right? And I think the story could have had that little out built in where it was like, oh my gosh, unbeknownst to anyone, you were being controlled by Egghead all along. But it doesn't do that, does it? It says, no, Hank, you're responsible for your own actions. And he's not really surprised by this. He's like, yeah, that's about what I thought. Let's face it, guys, I really suck. And I mean, he doesn't say it, but he all but says it. And yeah, we get that call back to his court martial where he just says, I guess I'll be going now. And that's all he says when he leaves the team. And it's whereas that when it was done that time, it was this very petulant, very very petty, pitiful guy who is just like, ugh, what a slime ball, right?
Yeah.
To call back to that here and put another spin on it, it's a little bit more redemptive. I don't know. I don't know if it gets us all the way there, but
hey, Tim, let's
leave on a positive note.
Let's not forget the rando again. Another appearance of someone that we saw. Turtles, the random appearance of a Star Fox.
Of Star Fox.
Yes.
Of Star Fox. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we get this weird cutaway to Star Fox on Titan. He is an Eternal. He is Thanos' brother, as a matter of fact. And he is about to join the Avengers, actually.
The very next episode, the very next issue, he does.
So there you go. So this is a setup for him to ultimately join the Avengers. He's supposed to be looking after the late Captain Marvel's, I guess,
girl,
love interest.
Love interest.
Alicia, this chick Elysius.
Yes.
And he was like, Marvel wanted me to look after you, but I'm being called by the Wanderlust again, because that's his whole thing. He's this dashing, lives this life of
well, that's his power too, though.
His power is to
basically he can seduce
women.
Yes, that's his power. Yes.
Well, to seduce anyone, but
yes,
primarily it's used in a way that makes women fall for him.
Played by the guy from One Direction in the Eternals, by the way.
Played, yes, by Harry Styles.
Yes.
And at the end of which I kind of hate that character anyway. So I sort of.
So I'm curious. Scott and Andy, did you guys put two together that was the same guy in the comic book as it was in the Eternals?
No, I did not.
Nope.
But
I didn't think you did, but now you know.
This was Harry Styles at the end of Eternals.
Yeah. After seeing Harry Styles attempt to act in that shitty movie Don't Worry Darling, they probably should just
Well, guess what? Now you guys have now seen two characters out of this arc that debuted in this arc.
Yeah, that's actually pretty impressive that we've seen them, and they've been recently. I get what you're saying, Sean. Recently debuted in the MCU.
Yep.
I mean, I know with comics we always got to have with like the last page. It's like, oh, and here's our next arc starting, but it's Hank Pym sucks. That's just what my final point.
Well, I would say the last few pages say, well, we both made some mistake, blah, blah, blah. And then you see Hank drive off in the sunset, and you see Janet crying in the window with all the Avengers standing behind her. And that's the end of the arc. And then bye-bye, Hank, for a while. That's it. We're done.
Right. And she finally lets that wall, that veil slip, right?
Which I like it. I like that's the final panel because she finally lets it all out. And I think that's a good way to end it. But we acknowledge that he punched her and he did it of his own free will. And I think that was a good way to end it, actually. I think it was Roger Stern, right?
It was Roger. Yes, it's all Roger Stern.
I think he tied it up the right way to do it. He didn't ignore it happen, but I think he tied it up the best way he possibly could have, to be honest with you. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a perfect world, you can tell this same story arc with the character. The slap is not necessary.
Well, no, but he's not the one that did the slap, so he had to figure his way out of it.
No, I'm not putting that on him by any means. I'm just looking big picture-wise when we look at the issues we covered and we say, was this a story worth telling, right, with this character? Yeah. And I think it is, but I think they
could have told the story without the slap. They could have
told the same story without. Yeah.
He's jilted. He's angry. He's feeling like a cuck. He needs to do something to feel better, and they could have done it totally without the slap for 100%. Yep.
Yeah, and the fact that the slap does exist and did happen means that you kind of have to tread very, very lightly after something like that. And I don't know that they really did, and I don't think that Jim Shooter was really the writer who should have handled that follow. Like, he shouldn't have done it in the first place, but the fact that he did kind of told you this is not going to be handled with a light touch. No pun intended, certainly.
Jim Shooter, the gift that keeps on giving. Hey,
really, it's fascinating.
I want to go back to something earlier, the start of this pod that Chip asked about basically Scott Lang being Ant-Man in the movies. I don't think this arc has anything to do with it. What I think Scott Lang is more modern day Ant-Man in most people's eyes, and it feels better in terms of the time frame the comics are in now. And I think more people would be familiar with it than they would Hank Pym as Iron Man or as Ant-Man, because he hasn't been Ant-Man for a long time. Do I think it has some symmetry? I don't know. I really don't. I don't think they could tell the story. I don't think they could have told the Ant-Man story they want to tell with Hank Pym in the role. I don't.
I don't think it helps that Hank Pym, founding Avenger, is an abusive.
Okay,
right?
But my question is, if they hadn't have told that story in the comics, do you think the Ant-Man movie we would have got modern day would have been with Hank Pym in a different movie, or would they wanted to tell the Scott Lang story if Scott Lang had still become Ant-Man regardless?
I think the real problem is that the Ant-Man movie was supposed to happen a lot earlier than it did, and if that had been the case, I think that would have been the time to introduce Hank Pym.
But then why put Hank
Ant-Man.
Pym in the movie at all? That's my whole point.
Yeah, well, because you can, if you introduce Hank Pym as Ant-Man, if that Ant-Man movie had happened a lot earlier than it did, because remember it was the whole Edgar Wright was going to direct it, but it just kept getting delayed.
It was being Edgar Wright.
Come on. And so it didn't happen until ultimately after Age of Ultron. And it's like, well, what are the two things Hank Pym is known for? Hitting his wife and creating Ultron.
But in the movie he didn't.
I think he would have if we.
Stark
I
did.
think we. Yeah, but I think he would have if we had gotten that movie when it was supposed to happen.
But so did they need him for Ant-Man because he created Pym particles and that was the only way to do it?
Maybe. I mean, Pym particles are a thing, so it helps. So it's like, I think they just wanted to explore the concept of a legacy character in the MCU.
Who do we need to interview? Who do we need to interview to find out? I really need to know now.
Yeah, I don't know. Kevin Feige, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll happen. But it's a really interesting question. I'd love to know the real answer. It's really interesting. So.
But to your point, I think your point is well taken. That if they were that
against it, why have him in the movie at all?
Why have him in the movie at all, right?
Because they would have found a way around it. They could have found a way around it without putting him in it if they wanted to, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it's sort of like it's good enough that we can. It's not so bad that we're not going to use him at all, and we're still going to use him in a heroic capacity, but it is so bad that he can't be the character. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe the redemption in the movie was they had. You haven't seen the movie yet, have you, Tim?
I don't care. It's fine.
I was going to say maybe
Ant-Man Quantumania spoilers.
Maybe I was going to say like the redemption in the third movie was that Janet cheated on Hank Pym with Bill Murray as a way of getting back for the comic. I don't know. I don't know.
But then he said that he hooked up with someone too, and I can't remember her name. Oh. And he's like, we all have needs. But
yeah, I know, but her need was with Bill Murray. I mean, let's be real.
But what if this is gonna sound fucked up? But I had this conversation with a friend. What if when she said that she had sex with Bill Murray, like Hank Pym just backhanded her then?
Oh God! So it happened, but
God damn it, Chip! You made me spill out my water on that. God damn
it! Oh my goodness!
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think if I were to redo the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think, and this is real, just total fan fiction now, right? I think I do include Hank and Janet as founding Avengers. I don't ever have him slap her at any point in the course of these movies, but I do probably have him hand the reins off to like Scott Lang at some point, so that you do get both characters in there, right?
And we didn't mention that in this arc, Scott Lang makes a very brief appearance twice. Once he goes to prison, once he goes to prison to break Hank out, and then the other one he goes to something with Janet to, I guess, the helmet or something. He brings
he replaces Iron Man in the story at the end. He's like, Tony Iron Man had a lot to do in his own title in so many words. So
and he brings the helmet.
Here's the thing he was working on. He told me to give it to you.
Yeah. And then he's gone again. And Janet kind of kicks him out. Janet kicks him out because he can't stand to see him shift into Ant-Man because it reminds her.
Right.
Yeah. So that's cheesy, but anyway.
I kind of like that. I feel like, again, it's intense for her.
I got it. But anyway, that's the arc. One of my all-time favorites. If you guys want to read it, I would go read it because it's a very interesting character study for sure, I thought. So.
That's well said. If nothing else, it's not like maybe the Avengers you expect. There's not a lot of Avengers action.
It'll shock you. It'll definitely shock you.
But as a character study, it's pretty interesting, and I got a lot out of it. I got a lot more out of it than I expected. I mean, I know we're running long, and I've pretty much said my piece as we've gone along here, but this gave me a lot more just as a sort of comics historian, because I do take an interest in just the overall history and kind of the tropes, the ins and outs of the industry. And this is where I'm like, oh, okay, I see early signs of this sort of thing, right? And
how much Marvel Cinematic Universe we get out of this arc, and I didn't even realize that until I actually read through it. I mean, it's pretty eye-opening. It's pretty insane too. So,
yeah.
So Scott, Scott, so I guess, are we going to ask everyone like final thoughts, Tim?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'll just say I think I've kind of said, my whole spiel as we've gone along here. I think it's a valuable character study. I think it certainly accomplished its initial goal of differentiating Hank Pym from his peers. It gave him a hook that was far different from the other intellectuals of the Marvel Universe. But I think you also could have accomplished this without having him abuse his wife, which is certainly a decision. It just seems like it was something that was done in haste and quickly realized, oh crap, we just stepped over the line here and we've got to do damage control.
Yeah.
But ultimately, Roger Stern salvages that over the course of 4 issues impressively and ties a neat little bow on it, I think.
I thought so. Schiff, would you recommend people to read this one? Did you like it in the end?
I would recommend people reading it just because of the historical significance of it. I do agree with Tim. Shooter got it off to a rocky start, and it didn't seem like he didn't know where the hell I think he might have thought, I know where I'm doing A to Z, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing from B to Y.
That is good point.
Yeah.
So I think I forgot his name. The guy that came in, tried to reclaim it.
Roger Stern.
Roger Stern. But by that point, it's too far gone. But definitely check it out for, like I said, the historical context of it, because, like I said, it's been 40 years, and Hank Pym's in the comic book world is still a wounded soldier, like he wounded Janet.
Yeah, well, you know what? And I also think that had subsequent writers been willing just to let this go, to let it stand, to let Roger Stern's conclusion truly be the final word on this matter, not that you can't ever bring it up again, but for every writer to come along and be like, well, I'm going to do my redemption story for Hank when it's already been done so many times, and that just keeps it in the collective consciousness. That's why we can't move on from this, I think, more than anything. But I think Roger Stern did the heavy lifting here, that if we could have just, I don't want to say drawn a line under it, but treated this guy as someone who, yes, he abused his wife, but he has atoned for that. He's gotten some therapy, and as controversial as that kind of is, we should allow for people to do better and to get better and to become better as human beings. And I think that could have been the story of Hank Pym ultimately, but because it just keeps coming around and around, and they can't let this thing go. That's why I say ultimately they just should have not done this in the first place. Just in terms of the one scene that goes too far. But as a character arc, it does have a lot of value.
And Andy, what do you think?
I mean, I liked it. It was a lot to ingest. I mean, not a lot of avenging. I mean, when they did fight, they They brought some
That's a
shitty
good point. Not a lot of
Not a lot of avenging.
Not a lot of avenging. A good way to put it. For
some
sure.
shitty robots and like the C Squad of villains. But I mean, if you're interested in like drama and again soap opera stuff, I mean, it's an interesting story and it played out and it had a lot of characters in it too. There was a lot going on. I had to get a scorecard out to keep track of who was where and what. But it was a fun read. I could see why you like it though. So I would recommend it, but just know it's not like it's more TV 1 hour drama than 2 hour Avenger movie.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say on it though is like Hank's not gone long. He goes to the West Coast Avengers, and by the way, his whole thing with robots, I do believe Tim. He also brings back the original Human Torch, Jim Hammond.
Oh, right. Yes, he does.
So he brings him back as a robot too, yes.
That was a whole thing because they thought that Vision was the original Human Torch.
Yes.
He was repurposed by Ultron.
Correct.
To become Vision. And then John Byrne decided he didn't want to do that.
Correct.
That they were separate entities and said, nope, and I'm going to bring back the original Human Torch. And
so Chip and Andy, that's a whole nother ordeal. There is 2 Human Torches. One was a robot, and Hank Pym brings him back for the West Coast Avengers. So just FYI.
Well, I mean, as unkind as John Byrne's writing was of the Vision, it was actually rather sympathetic of Hank Pym. He kind of did continue down this path that Stern had set him off on. And it sort of was like, we're seeing the story of, hey, people do have the capacity to change for the better.
Which, by the way,
I think they threw that out much later. Like they did a good job of, kind of keeping up with that. I think he has a little stint again with the Avengers in the 90s where he comes back as Giant Man. Yeah. That's during the Bob Harris run. My God.
Yeah.
One of my favorites, right? And, then they do Heroes Reborn. He comes back. Kurt Busiek does some really good work with Hank and Janet. They end up reconciling ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But then it becomes just the parade of nonstop. Well, he's a wife abuser, and now we have to fix him. And it's like, did you not read the past 20 years worth of character work for this guy? Like he's been as fixed as he can possibly be. He doesn't need to be fixed again.
Tim, and this is the last thing I'll say, and then because I know we're running late, but staying the West Coast Avengers. It made me think of, did you ever read the Phantom Rider arc in that series?
Ooh, yeah, that's rough.
That's
real rough.
That might be long
Talk
term,
about some bad Hawkeye.
Long term, maybe long term. We'll see.
Oof, I don't. Yeah, we may not be equipped to tackle that. We can try.
Maybe long term. That's down the road anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, we are running long.
Yes.
We knew we would, but just to wrap it up, I will direct people who are more interested in just kind of the background. If you're not going to read the comics and you're just more interested in sort of the backstory here, Sean, I think you provided a really good link. It's a Reddit thread actually from the subreddit called Hobby Drama, which I'm not familiar with, but it's called so it's a comics centered hobby drama as it implies. But the topic is titled "The Slap Heard Round the World," and if I can get it to pull up, there we go. The slap heard round the world: how a single panel destroyed Hank Pym's legacy. And so this is a lengthy, basically going over what we've already covered, but I just found it very well written. This person has a real knack for this sort of thing. It's written in a way that's very entertaining and easy to follow for as long as it is. And there's a ton of comments here, just kind of arguing and discussing, and nobody goes too far here, as is sometimes the case with Reddit, where it's like, ooh, this just became real toxic. Like it's a pretty civil discussion that I think is had over the course of this topic here on hobby drama on Reddit. So I got a kick out of that. So thank you, Sean.
Yeah, that's a great read. Yeah,
for pulling that up. There's a line at one point. I'll just say, at one point in the many redemptions that apparently don't redemption stories that don't take, even though he'd already been redeemed for Hank Pym. He opens like a shelter for battered women or something like that, and it's like, this was awkward because it read a bit like Darth Vader attending the ribbon cutting for a hospital of children stabbed to death by lightsabers.
Good Lord.
Jesus.
Was the one? I mean, this is the way it's written, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of lines like that. Yeah. Here we go. It's like Darth Saber cutting the ribbon at a home for children who got stabbed by lightsabers. So I basically did that justice. So, I don't know if it's that bad, but yeah, a little rough there. So if you do want to read this, all the issues you can find on Marvel Unlimited. We told you what they were, and there are some collections as well. On Kindle Comixology, there's a trade that collects issues 212 through 230. So that includes the stuff, the issues we didn't talk about here that aren't directly related to this story arc.
There's a Black Knight arc in there, by the way, too.
Yeah, there sure is. Yeah.
Yes.
He sucks.
Jeez.
You suck, Schiff. You're lucky I had to throw that in there just to be a dick. Anyway,
I'll tell you what does suck once we get off this call, because it's just unrelated.
All right.
But was disappointing to me about Black Knight. But anyway, I imagine this is probably one of those Avengers epic trades that's just collecting in various volumes.
Correct.
The entire run.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So and then paperback. It'll set you back a good $245 apparently on eBay, I guess.
Yes.
There's a Marvel Masterworks as well. That's a hardback. And it is apparently volume shift, just distracting me with this. Yeah. Avengers Marvel Masterworks volumes 20, 21, and 22. Again, that's going to give you the story in its entirety. But there's not I gather that there's not a dedicated trial of Yellow Jacket trade that is just these issues. You sort of have to either read them selectively on Marvel Unlimited, or get the digital collections that include a lot of other stuff as well. So anyway, that is the long and short of it. Mostly the long. This is our longest episode, I'm sure, by far. But there's a lot of issues, a lot to cover, and it gave me a ton of entertainment, and hopefully you guys a lot of insight. So, all right, let's get out of here. Sean, do you have anything you would like to promote podcasting-wise, social media-wise, that you want to put out into the world?
I will just promote over on the North-South feed, the 7 Months of Danger podcast, where we're going through the history of the Dangerous Alliance. I do that with Schiff, along with Logan and Matt Souza, and we are in the last 10 episodes of that pod series, so please give that one a listen.
Awesome. Scott Shiflett.
All right, I'm going to get this right for once.
Or don't, because it's funny if you don't.
First time for everything.
I got a new podcast here on the Pop feed called Play While You Listen. It's a video game podcast where I'm joined by a guest every month to go over the biggest news in video games and the releases for the next month. I can be found on here it's coming, it's fucking up now, and that can be found on Twitter at Play Listen Pod. And I do YouTube Roulette on the wrestling feed with Jake, Logan, and Matt Souza and Sean every 7 months. And that's it.
Very good. Andy Atherton, what do you got going on?
Yeah, just check me out on this very feed, part of the Video Jukebox. So every weekday at 8 a.m., I usually do 2 of them a week. And then every Thursday, I have one of my many podcasts drop, whether it's Blockbuster Rewatch, Pop Goes the Classics, the Pixar Live Watches, the Disney series, the Muppet Pod, the Cartoon Pod, Laugh-In Theater, lots of fun stuff. And check me out on Stream Lounge. I'm pretty much there every Wednesday night, alternating between Pixar Live Watches and Blockbuster Live Watches. Just got to do all caught up on the MCU. Going to be doing Wakanda Forever as of this recording is my next one, and then hitting a couple of randos, and then getting into the Star Wars saga, starting at Episode 4 in the proper order as God intended. And in Pixar, I believe I am up to the Good Dinosaur next, which sucks. So not looking
Sounds like
forward.
you're making up Pixar games.
So I'm making a Pixar movie. Yeah, it's not good.
Good
it's either that or Inside Out. I
Dinosaur.
forget which one is next. They all blend together at some point. And then on the Wrestling Network, check me out on Who's Next, dropping once a month, myself and Logan, going over the previous month of television on the NXT brand. Current product, not the legacy content like another fine podcast covers on that very feed. Yeah. And then, just whatever place to be, nation.com, go there, pods, articles, have fun.
Yeah, well, speaking of that legacy NXT podcast, that is one that I do. It's called PTB NXT with myself, Jennifer Smith, and Jacob Williams. That can be found on Place to Be Nation Wrestling. We're in the year 2015 of NXT, going through all the we've already covered 2014, so we're doing all the weekly TVs and takeovers, and we are rapidly approaching Sami Zayn's rematch. The rematch between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, this time with Sami challenging for the NXT Championship. So kind of topical, given what's currently going on WWE-wise, heading into WrestleMania with these two characters very prominently featured. Some nice unplanned synergy on our part there. Also, on Place to Be Nation Wrestling, I do a show called Talkin' WCW. It is with Jennifer Smith as well and Greg Phillips. Had our most recent edition of that on Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Pretty fun. And we'll have another episode coming very soon in the month of March. Going to be select matches that we choose from Uncensored, the great March pay-per-view.
I know what Jenny's picking.
WCW. She already did that match, though, so these will be matches we haven't talked about yet from Uncensored. So we've already done the most infamous matches from the show, I feel like. We've done King of the Road, we've done the Alliance to End Hulkamania Doomsday Cage match, so we're going to have to get a little creative, but Uncensored is the gift that keeps on giving. Right here on Place to Be Nation Pop, I did a podcast with you, Andy, your new podcast called Cartoons of Our Youth. So just the second episode of that, we talked some gargoyles.
I quite enjoyed that. You and Sean set the bar really high on that pod, being the first two guests, and looking forward to what's coming next.
Yeah, well, I liked that show. I liked y'all's debut episode, Sean, talking some G.I. Joe with you. So, gargoyles,
I like the gargoyles
near and dear.
too. It's great. It's good.
Near and dear to my
It's just a
heart.
love fest here. I love you guys.
Gargoyles was
Really.
good. It's not one I got into, and he's got me into wanting to watch it now. So
It
I
worked.
know. God.
It's got me rewatching it now. Jesus, like I don't have enough going on. Hell. And if you're looking for more melodramatic storytelling, I have 90210 NoSo, a Beverly Hills 90210 retrospective, episode by episode. We are in the second season now, we being myself and the immortal JT Rosero. We're closing in on some major shakeups in the second season. We have met Emily Valentine. Scott is still on the show, but let's just say that things are going to change.
My time is coming. I'm excited.
The time is coming very soon.
My time is coming. Yes.
Oh boy. If you want to talk about these shows or anything else, social media wise, I am on Twitter at Cyke68, CYKE68. I did a lot of talking tonight.
You sure did. You did a great job, Tim.
Fucking killed it.
Thank you for putting up with me, guys. I know this was
put up with you. Shit, I was dying for this shit. I'm good.
Good. That's what I want to hear, but I want to hear it from everyone. So. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this as much as we did. Sean, I look forward as much, if not more, as you. But send us feedback as well if you listened and enjoyed this. If you didn't, that's fine. I mean, we can take it. We're not, weak little ninnies. You can throw us around. Never mind. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking there.
No, please keep going. It's usually me who fucks up at the end, so keep on.
Nope, I'm not going to step in it after I've done so well up to this point. No uncouth comments here.
Looking forward to next month. I believe it's Tim's pick once again. We've gone around the bases once already.
It's hard to believe.
It is your pick, Tim. Next round's your pick.
I don't know what it's going to be yet, so yeah, I'll let you guys know in the chats. So,
awesome.
Have a lot of ideas. Haven't settled on any of them just yet. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us. We're going to get out of here, but we will see you again hopefully next month. This seems like a semi-month. It's as monthly as we can make it. I'll put it that way.
Well, this one was my fault, so we'll see.
Not really.
Usually is.
Well, anyway. We'll be back when we're back. It won't be too
fuck
terribly
myself
long.
On that one. Let's end this. Let's go.
And we'll all go fuck ourselves. Good night, everybody.